quarterfinal number 2 kicking off right now. The Bolts taking on the Leviathans. Lightning and water, there's something going on there scientifically we could probably break down on. It's myself, Gormizer. Taco is still hanging out with me, but now we've got Hazer to talk about this one, coming back to the desk. And Hazer, since you weren't there for the, whatever that's called, the mid-game show, what is that called?
The halftime show?
There we go. Halftime. How did I forget that phrase? It's so usual. Hey, either way, I'll give you a little bit of an opportunity to talk about these teams, specifically right now for the Leviathans. Like, what are your thoughts on them and specifically for this set?
The Leviathans are a fantastic team during the regular season. But when it comes to events, they can often fall apart. They look like a different team. Their picks and bans fall apart. Even their relic usage and builds sometimes aren't what they should be and what they can be during the regular season. So if they play like they do during the regular season, I see them going all the way to finals. But it's whether they can, whether they can make that if a reality.
And Taco, we just got to talk about him. We highlighted Zap, we highlighted Hardcore, but you got to talk about Shinto. You have to talk about Panatom. I'm actually kind of surprised we haven't talked about him a lot. But it feels like this mid 3v3 from the Leviathans is incredibly strong.
It is a relatively strong 3v3, especially when you factor in that Shinto definitely loves his pressure picks, definitely loves absorbing all of the farm possible. I mean, that's probably one of the main reasons why we don't necessarily get to highlight beneath them as much as we would probably like in comparison to other junglers in the league. Mins is definitely a little bit starving in comparison to some of these other junglers, but it's for good purpose. It's because Shinto is such a controlling player, especially when he has all that farm, all that lead capability. But I think that for the same saying that could be said about the Leviathans in terms of them playing differently when it comes to tournament time, I think individually Zapman as well becomes a completely different player when it comes to the Worlds and tournament events.
And you got to think about it. Zap is the first player we get to talk about this weekend who is going for the 3-time back-to-back-to-back. Something that no one has been able to do is get a third ring, let alone trying to do it 3 times in a row. And we always mentioned it, Hazer, when we were talking about this swap, but it feels like he should also be the one that brings that level of calm. Like there shouldn't be as many chokes from the Leviathans. It should be Zap kind of helping them stay level-headed in their sets.
Yeah, I mean, Zap's been doing it as long as it's been there to do in terms of competitive SMITE. He's been there, Barra's been there, they've both got the experience, and hopefully Zap brings that maturity and that calmness to this team and can talk them through any issues they have and stop them kind of, I guess, just falling apart under the pressure.
There are people who've been watching since season 1, and they're like, man, we still have Zap versus Barra, huh? That's still happening? Can't believe it. Either way, it is, in fact, still happening. The Bolts are the opponents here for the Leviathans. While Zap might be going for the back-to-back-to-back, of course, we mentioned Barracuda a little bit earlier. He's still looking for a second ring. I think Vin in a very similar position. Jake, who just had his rookie year in Season 7. Of course, Haddix, who's having his rookie SBL year now. And, we'll go right back over to you, Hazer. I almost called you Haddix just because of the double H. Hazer, what are your thoughts on the Bolts here in this set as well?
Bolts are a bit of a wild card team for me. They have the space and the potential to really perform highly, but there's a lot of players on this team who I think can be quite hard-cold. You're looking at Jake, you're looking at, I think Haddix has had his moments, and I think Laspera as well. All can potentially go off and go crazy and carry games, but also can be the reason their team loses games. So just want to see the consistency from them in this set, and if they come in hot and if all of them hit form at the same time, then they can be a really, really difficult team to beat.
And Taco, how are you feeling about the Bolts' chances here versus the Leviathans?
Kind of doubling down on that awesome Jake discussion in the sense that we have definitely seen some fantastic sets out of Jake, but we have also seen some incredibly awful lows. And when it comes to a discussion of consistency, I think that Rongyu definitely a clear favorite here. But again, that's also stemming from the regular season performances. As far as these actual tournament events are concerned, I think the closest that the Leviathans have experienced with that is the playoffs. And again, there's still a lot of different, I guess, indirect pressure being applied here today, despite the fact that there isn't that actual live audience, that live crowd. It's certainly still something that will weigh on a player's mental subconsciously, and whether or not the Leviathans are able to break through that mental barrier in terms of their past Worlds performances, that'll really be the pretty much do or die factor for that team.
I will say both of these teams have played over 100 games in the SBL this year, so a lot of pressure behind them. I was just looking at it because I was trying to figure things out. Yamoja's been banned against the Leviathans 80 times. That's twice anybody else. We can go ahead and just look at some of these tweets. Tell us how you're watching at home. Tweet us at SmiteProUse, hashtag SWC at home. And of course, we can see how things are going. Excited for Worlds this year. It is so good already. I can agree with that. The first set shows that you can't count out the underdogs, and I can't believe anything more true than that. And of course, the Bolts fans getting ready and decorated for this set. I'm sure they're feeling it, but they are not alone here. The Leviathans have some of their fans out there as well getting decorated for the event on top of that. Plus, you've got two dogs that are ready and waiting for them to be able to come through. Of course, rooting for Zapman here, but I think there might be a little bit of bias, Hazer, from the dogs here.
Maybe
at
a
least
tad
those
there.
two specifically.
Yeah, maybe a tad.
We'll have to figure out whether or not they will be happy tonight or if Zap's going to have to give them a lot of treats later. I guess that's going to be the only way to balance things out. Leviathan's first pick up against the Bolts here in game number 1 of quarterfinal 2. And it seems like the Bolts have done at least the bare minimum of their homework. They did ban out the Yamoja. It's the Odin on the other side, and Taco, there's been a lot of Odin getting banned away so far.
Is it really homework if it's just been happening all year, though?
You're just not allowed to have
the
it.
Leviathans, I just pairings that will never get to go together, Yamoja and Rangyu. It's just a given. It's as expected as I think. Some of these healer comps being a little bit more opened up. These Odin bans, I think, kind of forcing the Bolt's hand in terms of trying to strip away that hell, because the last thing that I think I want to see, and especially what the Bolts don't want to see, is Shinto getting his hands on that hell.
I can think of a lot of gods I don't want most of the Leviathans
I don't
to
want
get
to
their
see
hands
healers,
on.
man.
It's the healers. Yeah, they're going to be trying to dodge that out. It's the Odin, the Kamazats, and now the Achilles banned out there by the Leviathans. And Hazer, most of those seem pretty par for the course. At least Odin and Achilles we got to see a little bit of last set. And the Kamazats showed up, like once at the very beginning of last set, lost, and then disappeared forever.
Yeah, unusual to see how little prevalence we saw of the Kamazats in the last set. Straight back to the top 3 bans in this one. And it is almost 3 target bans from the Bulls. They get rid of the Yamoja, they get rid of the Hell, and then they get rid of
one for
the
each
shark.
lane.
Yeah, Hark the Shark on this RTO. Definitely a scary beast.
Hamus and Cobb is the very first lock-in. Taco, a lot of what we saw to this during placements was mid lane, but this is something that Zap has been around for metas where he's strong, could play it if necessary. This is a strong pickup to start things off.
It's a nice flex pickup, that's for sure, but the Bolts having a relatively strong response to the Ola run. Bastet also still completely up for grabs, although one thing that's always fun to see between different teams, although they are choosing to lock in the Bastet, I think it's just a little bit too good to give up for that game 1 presence, but teams just have different styles of play. They have different focuses, and I think that the Bolts know that the Leviathans, they love prioritizing that duo side pressure, and so Amus and Cobb could potentially be a little misleading here because, well, I guess maybe less so with that Soul lock-in.
Yeah, Soul alongside the Erlong Shin, something that's been nice for Panatom throughout this entire year. And this feels, actually, oddly enough, with the Soul AMC, it feels a little more like Dragon's Bolts-esque than it stands out to me as something that the Leviathans have run a lot. And Hazer, I mean, the Soul, while it's something that they're really good with, is still a little fresh.
Yeah, my first thought there was like Barracuda Sol, but nope, it's on the other side. Leviathans have locked in that Sol. Definitely a pick we've not seen. I don't feel like we've seen it that much out of the Leviathans at all this season, as far as I can remember anyway. An unusual one. Maybe it's a takeaway rather than something they really prioritized. And it does give the Sol and the AMC that flex potential. Either of these could be going mid, either of these could be going Hunter. It really just depends which one has the better matchup, I think.
Which one Shinta is thinking, hey, wait, no, that one's mine now, Zap. You sit down, I'll play whatever I want. ESET gets locked in, though, and it took 9 months of like Pro League play to even see her played. The Bolts played her quite a few times during placements. And Taco, this is not something that we're talking about for Venenu. This is a conversation we have to have that it is for Jake more than likely.
Some of that Quake supremacy definitely bleeding through still here today in the SPL, and for good reason. ESET, I think, has a lot of control, but mostly keeping an eye on whether or not the Leviathans want to look for a Fafnir pickup. They have so much auto attack based focus. Fafnir would really complement their top 3 so far, but the main concern again is just this ESET. That silence can be extremely problematic for those draconic transformations, and I guess just a lot of interrupt potential between the Sanctified Field and this ESET's utility.
Well, a lot of ban focus from the Bolts on the support role. Terra, Xing Chen get banned out by them to round out their 5 bans. The Leviathans on the other side end up targeting out Haddix, specifically Osiris, and the Hercules. taken away from him. Harcourt still needs his pick as well. And it's just going to be a toss-up for where the Bolts go with this. Hazer, one of the things, assuming this is going to be an ESET support, which is, it's a wild sentence that I just said here. that is definitely one that is going to catch me off guard for a while. They are going to be lacking a little bit in terms of frontline early on, right? Eventually, she might be able to match up, and the healing will be there. But now with the Nike, I'm a little worried about the tanks, or I guess like the just tanky presence that the Bolts might be lacking.
Yeah, ESET definitely one of the squishier frontliners.
No
There's
way
a Nox.
they actually did it. There's no way.
I saw the hover and I was like, I'm not even going to talk. There's a Nox on a check.
That's the appropriate way to take Nox. If it's hovered, you don't look at it. They knocked.
There's Nox in check. There's Nox in check. I'm out. Someone sub in. Mifflin.
So
he has to play the Brazilian skin. He needs to unlock that Chalk passive fully. I love it, personally. I think that Chalk has just outright laning pressure. It's a double-edged sword in a sense, where if you don't get that early control in the laning phase, certainly can be tough for Chalk's influence to kind of spread throughout the team fight, but there is some AoE control. Whether or not this Nox success,
yeah, there it is.
that is the real wild card of this matchup, is because the Nox, I think, is solely intended just to silence out the ESET on her Wing Gust.
This is, and was now, the last god that needed to be picked this year to be played in a competitive game, period. It was just Nox that we were waiting on.
Nice.
So the
Oh,
Leviathans
doing you a
get
solid.
yeah, they do us a solid. That is 2 years in a row now. Every single god has been played throughout the year in the Pro League. Chiron gets locked in. That feels like a Venenu pick. This is a wild conversation. What's the Chiron matchup versus Nox like?
It's pretty great. You can cleanse the one. You can cleanse the one if one of your frontliners gets caught by it, but the thing is, you got to be careful here. This Chiron going to have a tough time against the check dive is the one thing I would say. Good matchup into the Nox, not so good into the check.
And that's the biggest thing. I go back to what I said earlier, Taco, but you've got Nike, and that's kind of it. Like, that's your front line, that's your engage. Eventually, ESET's going to be able to stand up there, but not really for long, even with a bunch of tank items. Do you think that that's going to struggle up against specifically the Chalk and the Erlang Shen?
Well, it's largely just the route that I'm going to keep an eye on for this Nox, because if Nox is able to control the Nike and the Bastet's mobility off of that route silence combination, I really like the benefit of having the Nox for that damage reduction on her ultimate. I think that is something that tends to be a little bit overlooked by players when they see a Nox. I mean, it's always laughs at the Nox, but then you remember how much damage you're actually missing out on once you get into the heavy of those team fights. So it's all going to come down to positioning and placements, realistically, for the Leviathans.
And of course, I completely overlooked the top three for the Leviathans. I saw Nox,
Yeah,
and
Nox
I
support,
tunnel vision. Yeah, something that we saw like from PBM, I think last year in Phase 2, like a very, very niche set of games where Nox support was played, and it didn't really. I mean, it did well in those games, but I don't think those were very high-pressure games for them to do well in. Nox support up against whatever it is going to be matching up against. Hazer, how do you like that?
Well, I mean, if it was ever going to be a good Nox support game,
It's up against ESET support.
ESET support, Bastet, she's going to pounce in. You can control her, stop her pouncing out. That one has a cripple on it, stops her getting back out there. The two silence as well, and not bad into the night. You can stop that rend, and you can stop her getting her ult off, or at least make her beads to get her ult off, and maybe you can burst her down in that CC chain. So if it was ever going to be good, it's now.
Well, I'm going to pull myself, force myself away from some of the hyper-focus here. Taco, when you look at the team fights for these teams, if we make it to late game, it should be a clown fiesta, but does anyone stand out on top?
Whew. Well, naturally, you'd want to anticipate that the Bolts would have the advantage in the late game, but I just can't ever count out the shred from Soul, from... Well, the same could be said, though, for the Olaran. That's the difference maker here, is that it's really all going to hinge on whether or not the Leviathans can clean sweep on their initial team fights.
Well, we've got a Nox coming into this game. It's Leviathans, it's Bolts, it's game number 1 of the second quarterfinals, and we got J-Mac and Mifflin waiting to take you through it.
Man, I am excited. First game of our second set, and we're going to have it with a Nox, a god who has not seen a game of competitive all year long. And who else but Rong Yu on the Leviathans to bring it out here in the first game up against the Olympus Bolts. J-Mac and Mifflin here to bring you all the action alongside Doug. And when there's a Nox on the enemy team in any other mode that you play, what's the first thing that you pick up? beads. Every single Bolts member's got one.
Yeah, you just got to think if this Nox is connecting the combo onto just about anyone on the Olympus Bolts, the single target damage output of this Leviathan's draft will shred. I don't care if you're targeting Awesome Jake inside a circle protection with all that damage mitigation and a heal. If Rongyu is just connecting the root, you've got Stinger from Shinto, you've got Supernova from Zapman, Panatom as well, shreds through anybody with this Mannequin Scepter. But I have to admit a failing to you, J-Mac, and to the fans at home. I am not the most versed in Nox theory. I'm not certain how her ability rotation interacts with Sanctified Field. You'd think with time dilation, there is potential here that Rongyu just locks somebody down for like a half hour.
It is quite possible, but action in the dual lane. Spirit Ball does clip Zapman. He's forced to separate. For a second one, the silence comes through for Rongyu to prevent any further aggression from the Olympus Bolts. But a root onto Jake is going to be good, at least to hold him for a moment. But this, we're in a Quadra Mage dual lane Mifflin. That just clicked with me.
Yeah, welcome to the New Age, and the New Age happens to hate Guardians and Hunters both. The Olympus Bolts and Leviathans going for a bit of an unorthodox draft here. Panatom tries to get aggressive, unsuccessful in doing so.
Oracle Harpies do go to the Leviathans. And I was almost going to say, oh no, Guardians and Hunters, they're just somewhere else. No, it's just the Hunters that are somewhere else, not a Guardian in sight this game, as it is a double Warrior solo lane. But back into this dual lane, I mean, Nox versus Z-Set, on paper, does seem like a really strong matchup for this Nox.
I mean, you're not getting Wind Gust off, that's for sure. That ability might as well be a moot point, but you're not really maxing out Wind Gust in this matchup, I believe. More likely, Jake picks up the Spirit Ball, does lose out on his beads here, so next time Rongyu connects that, Jake might be headed back to base in a body bag.
Rongyu and Zapman really putting the pressure up against Barra Jake in this dual lane. Over to the mid lane for the Hunters, a slight bit of difference in their builds. A Bluestone first out compared to the Death Stole for those two Hunters out there. Kind of, you know, what's maybe the thought process on getting the Death Stole versus the Bluestone for Ven?
Well, Shinto doesn't necessarily need to get sustain from his starter item, the Death Toll. You're getting HP from Hives either way, as well as attack speed, so the trade potential likely favoring Shinto, as well as burst potential once he finishes up that Transcendence, whereas Ven, he's just leaning into a sustain as well. Chiron gets some from the passive, and now, as well, the auto attacks, he's Ven rather, is going to stick around in lane for much, much longer.
Well, Rongyu trying to get some pressure up towards that purple buff at the very least. The solo lane, I mean, we could talk to death about the solo lane. I mean, it's chalk, so that's kind of the new, maybe the unique thing out there in the solo lane. We've seen a little bit of chalk throughout this year. I think most notably, we've mostly seen it over in the SCC over anything else. I think like Benny Q played at mid. We saw Sino play at jungle. Don't get to see chalk too often.
No, but when you do, you can expect that he's going to be alive for a very long time. The self-sustain, the CC immunity, as well as a meditation pickup for Yark means that he's going to sit in that lane for as long as he wants. He's very willing to take trades up against Haddix. Once they both tick over towards level 5, Rend is going to be very hard to channel for the rookie on the Olympus Bolts. I'm waiting for these Yark rotations, though. We heard from it from Hazer on the desk. Ven's going to struggle into this chalk matchup. That silence, nearly unavoidable for a Chiron.
A lot of pressure, really nowhere, honestly. We saw a slight invade at that blue buff earlier on. We see this back and forth kind of trade of pressure in this dual lane between this double mage dual lane that we've got going on between them. But maybe the first little bit coming out here from Panatom, the first real rotation over towards a lane, but doesn't even seem like he's ready to go for one just yet. Just going to get a little bit of extra farm and head back to base.
I am suspecting that Panatom is going to be the pace setter for the Leviathans going forward. Sure, Bastet incredibly strong right now. Phenomenal scaling. Once you get that ultimate available, Lazarus' displacement utility is going to be incredibly high. But Panatom with Mannequin Scepter on Erlang Shen is a story as old as Panatom himself. He should be able to just walk into a lane and dominate.
Well, it should be some high action out of Panatom here in this Warrior role in the jungle with this Warrior. A lot of beads, pressure really across the board for everybody. I'm honestly completely surprised that Panatom himself isn't making a rotation over towards this dual lane. I mean, they got the beads on Jake earlier on, making sure to strip those out. Now those are back off cooldown. I would have expected during that minute and a half or so that he had, he could have done something with it.
Maybe, but for now, Panatom just going to bide his time, doesn't want to overcommit on the aggression. It is going to be very difficult for Panatom to decide where he allocates his ganks now that Jake's beads are back up as well. So instead, it may be a little bit more of a waiting role for him, waiting for the Leviathans, someone else on the map to burn away that defensive relic, set up for him to find some of these ganks, especially considering with Blink early on, that really does put the onus on Panatom to get involved on the map, specifically Oleron. That was the conversation around the last set. Stewart was allowed to free farm for the first 20 or so minutes every single time he went towards this late game hyper carry. I don't think the Leviathans can allow Barracuda to do the same thing.
Yeah, well, it seems everybody's going for a bit of free farm here. Dash in from Wrong Yu, catches Jake, the bees are out, and Jake is down to about 40% health just from one small combo out of the support and the mid laner. You can expect that time and time again. That is the staple of Nox. Can you hit your 1-2? Yes, you're good on Nox. Can you not? You should probably find another support to be popping around here as Panatom gets aggressive up to Laz, but a quick jump over the wall gets him out.
Panatom does lose out on the Blink, however, so again, putting himself on a timer, has to wait a little bit longer to try yet again to make his stamp known on the map. And you know, you say you gotta hit the combo on Nox. I'm not certain that that's the case. If you're just connecting the silence and at least connecting the root elsewhere on support, you're not really worried about the bulk of your damage. It's just that utility setup, and Wrong Yu can do it from a range, doesn't really have to put himself at risk either. I might be a fan of this pick.
Now, Lasbra going to be the first jungler to get aggressive in a lane, but that Desaparate was already out by Zapman, and that'll make sure that he can get back safely to his tower. But Zapman's walking back up. Lasbra goes for the ult, picks him up in place, and that's first blood over to the Olympus bolts off the back of the jungler.
Easy enough for Lasbra, just routes his enemy Zapman, getting the Zapman treatment, stuck behind his own tower, just wants to work his way towards that purple buff, but is immediately punished for it. And that's not what you want to see if you're a Leviathans fan. If anyone should be coming out ahead in this duel lane, it should be the more aggressive of the two magical hunters. And that Soul, this Oleron, has gone unchecked as of the last 7 minutes.
But the big thing to note with these graphs popping up here is that gold was in favor of the Leviathans earlier on, about 500. So that all that first blood did was just bring it back to a state of even. Now, 200 gold this early in the game, absolutely nothing. You know, it's a ward for a couple of different players here. Lasbra again wants to get aggressive. Ben with the Centaurus shots needs the damage to maybe find Shinto, but it's not going to be enough, and the cat will not seal the deal. Panatom goes in aggressive, but doesn't find anything. Jake with the silence, with the Spirit Ball, with the Circle of Protection, takes him down, and the support grabs him.
The Olympus bolts have come to play. Early game aggression favoring the Chaos team here. Shinto forced out. Panatom steps up just to create some space. Make sure that AMC is able to survive that engagement, but it comes at a cost.
Spirit Ball on the Wrong Yu, but it does next to nothing in damage. Silence comes out. Root hits Jake, but not much more beyond there. Lasbra goes for the shot on the ultimate, but just misses Wrong Yu and Shinto. And that'll be an ult expended for the jungler. Zapman even sitting by, looking like he wanted to make a rotation in, but now he's the one getting rotated on. Venenu and Barracuda dashing in aggressively.
Wow.
But that Desaparate, just such a good ability to get him out.
Awesome. Jake might be cut out in the jungle here, but it's a turn on to Wrong Yu, who's taken a lot of damage. Meditation Pop should spell the end of that engagement, unless Panatom's got something to say.
Panatom gets the pin, he gets the taunt, the knock up, and Awesome Jake has nowhere to go. The shield holds him out, but not for much longer. Panatom finally puts the Leviathans on the board with their first kill, and now Haddix has made his rotation over from the solo lane. Sanctified Fields out of Barracuda expended, but not much more that he can do.
Wrong Yu dashes in, finds the root onto Ven, forces out that beads early on. Can Panatom chase it out? Not the case this time. This has been a scrappy engagement, just one team finding a pick, trying to rotate towards these objectives, and immediately get caught out.
Oh no, Venenu stepped a little too far forward. Supernova out of Zapman clips him and takes him out and evens up the kills across the board and puts that goal just a little bit back towards the Leviathans. And that experience tipping back their way too. 1,400 XP here 9 minutes in.
I thought originally off of that first pick, the Olympus Bolts were going to rotate over towards the Gold Fury. They had a 4-man stacking on the left-hand side, even forcing Zapman to retreat, but immediately the Leviathans rotate in numbers and make sure that the Olympus Bolts aren't able to go for that neutral objective. That's the threat that this Olympus Bolts draft has. If they're left alone with Pyromancer, Gold Fury, Fire Giant for 30 or so seconds, they've got the Shred with essentially a double hunter composition between Chiron and Oleron. They've also got the Confirmation. Circle Protection, going to be the best tool in the game right now to just secure these objectives. The Leviathans playing very well, proactively, making sure that the Olympus Bolts are given no space around the neutrals.
Shinto picks up a Blackthorn Hammer of his own while Panatom gets jumped on by Laz, and Lasbra misses the ultimate yet again. And that will mean that Panatom can go back to base all onto his own. Awesome Jake Takes a lot of poke here in the mid lane. Shinto needs a little bit more damage, and a panic ult out of Jake will mean Circle of Protection is gone for the next team fight. But going back to what I was trying to highlight here in the mid lane, it's a Blackthorn Hammer out of the Hunter in this mid spot.
Yeah, just a good bit of survivability. You're playing a god that is largely immobile, so you want to have that going forward. Then force to use the Centaurus just to keep the wave out of his tower here. The Leviathans, they're playing with pressure in the center.
Addicts down to a quarter health in front of his tier 1 tower. Yarkor with a sustain that you were talking about earlier on Chalk. He's got that Blackthorn. He's going towards what might even just be a Transcendence that we've been seeing so popular.
Fast.
But who cares about that, because there's a Pyromancer, and with 2 heavy basic attackers there, they're able to steal that one out. Atlantis Leviathans come up with the Pyro.
The Leviathans just playing so well around their pressure. The second they're able to force anyone back from the Olympus bolts. Doesn't matter if it's a kill or a TKO. They are posturing towards the jungle, just checking that reaction time for the bolts. This time around, nobody on the Chaos side in range to put up a defense on the Pyromancer, and with circle protection being stripped away a little bit earlier, there's really not a lot of risk of steal from the Olympus bolts either. The Leviathans just perfectly rotating throughout the map and extending their lead ever so slightly, but the largest we've seen so far.
Well, so far, Lasbra is 1 for 3 on these ultimates. The one that he did hit ended up being a nice kill against Zapman, but the other 2, 1 whiff in the mid lane, then 1 whiff over on that right side jungle. He can start landing some of these ultimates that can be big impacts. Zapman wants to steal away this Harpy, but it doesn't seem like he did so. Barracuda snags a 1 and puts a nice little chunk of damage on Zap.
Take a peek at the build from Panatom. Transitions into a very early Magi's Blessing. I think maybe those skirmishes up against Lasbra put some scare into him early on. Does not want to get caught out by that single target CC from the Bastet. So now Panatom can play about as aggressively as he wants. He's got the Blink available. Magi's is up. Bede's going to be up very shortly as well. Panatom has effectively made himself a great initiator for his team. The Olympus Bolts, I think it's all up to Jake. Try and use that silence to strip away that CC immunity, or Panatom's going to be running amok in the back line.
An item we don't get to see very often. Usually would only come out of the days of when we saw the Naja, the Fenrir supports and whatnot, but now with this Nox, a Lono's Mask as a second item for Wrong You right out the gate.
That's just gross, man. That is just nasty. And how fitting is it for Nox to come out in her SPL debut and go towards one of the grossest items in the game, now taking a lot less damage in these engagements. You might have been concerned looking at the draft from the Leviathans that the front line was going to be lacking. Don't be.
There's the cripple onto Lasbra. That will get his beads out. He'll be able to jump away. The Leviathan, specifically Wrong You here on this Nox, putting the fear of God into the Olympus bolts. They can't even walk around their own jungle. There's so much CC around this area. And the Leviathans can once again control the vision on this right side, stripping away a ward. But again, stripping away the beads from the jungler.
A very nuanced approach to playing against Olorun. The Leviathans say, let's just not. Most teams would say, okay, Olorun, largely immobile. We want to shut him down throughout the early. The late game is going to be a problem. The Leviathans say, we've got pressure on the right-hand side of the map. We can control the Pyromancer very consistently. Greater Scorpions going their way as well. They trust Zapman to maybe match some of that late game scaling that this Olorun is bringing. So both Hunters now, for both of these squads, have been allowed to free farm for the last 13 minutes. But taking a peek at the experience gaps on the map, specifically Ven, has been struggling to keep up with Shinto. That's nothing new. Every mid laner in the league has struggled to keep up with Shinto, but considering the pace of this game, 2-2 in the slash line, a 2-level lead for the AMC, that does not bode well for the Olympus Bolts.
I mean, as you so eloquently put it the last time we saw Leviathans, the most selfish mid laner when it comes to getting farm on the map in Shinto. Highest GPM in the league, one of the highest KDAs in the league as well on this mid lane. He's starting out this game at 0-0-1. It's been a fairly quiet latter half with only 4 kills on the board and a very small 1k gold lead up for the Leviathans.
Take a peek at Yarkor's build as well. Generally, it's the Blackthorn immediately into Mystical Mail. Instead, Transcendence, the scaling on this Chalk, very nice. The damage output, obviously something you're going to get a boon for from the Transcendence pickup, but more so it's the healing that actually scales with power. So now effectively Yarkor, in building Transcendence, has made himself significantly tankier just from his self-sustain. It is going to be very hard to shut him down, and well, we're 10 stacks away to a fully stacked Transcendence. CDR is going to be there. He's going to be able to consistently get involved in these team fights as well. This is a very annoying draft that the Leviathans have got for themselves. The Olympus Bolts, they're going to be contending with a lot of silences going forward.
And Mifflin, I mean, with all this healing, there's at least been one response so far out of Lasbra for the form of anti-heal with a Brawler's Beatstick. Haddix can pick up a Pestilence if he so wishes to get a little bit of extra AoE anti-heal to try and deal with that. Gotta imagine maybe a little anti-heal on the side of Leviathans, deal with circle protection. Maybe Zapman needs a little help to separate, just barely, but even still has to use the beads after the cat connects. Awesome Jake gets crippled out inside the silence puddle, but Zapman's down to half. Lasbra wants blood. Spirit Ball connects. Supernova lands too, but Zapman uses the Aegis. He's still got the cat chasing him, but finally it goes down. Awesome Jake and Barracuda now inside the sanctified field, but Wrong You will hold Lasbra back with the cripple.
And Panatom was under no threat of death there, still maintains the Magi's blessing throughout that entire engagement. The Olympus Bolts dedicate a lot of very important cooldowns in that trade, and they don't pick up any kills for it. Sanctified Field Loss, Circle Protection as well, even Lasbra's ultimate, but they do net themselves a couple of TKOs. Zapman forced back to base, opens up the door for just this. Gold Fury pulled out.
In the back line, gets the beads out of Anu, gets the Centaurus. Panatom runs as fast as he can in this turtle form to make it back to safety, but now that Yarkor and Haddix have joined the party, it's all about this fight around the Gold Fury, or maybe just a dissuading of these teams around the gold, as both teams disperse and head back towards their respective lanes, get their buffs, get their farm up. And I thought maybe we were going to see a big fight there, but a lot of relics expended, especially on the side of Leviathans.
Yeah, Leviathan's Hunter, Zapman, loses out on both his defensive relics, beads and Aegis. It's going to be a little while until he's able to utilize those, but it wasn't cheap for the Olympus Bolts either. They utilized every single one of their ultimates. Beads lost on Lasbra and Ven, so now Wrong You has got an easy target to look forward to in these next couple of team fights, and neither team has been able to go towards this Gold Fury as of just yet, but you got to think that with all these resources lost, both of these teams are going to be looking for an opportunity very shortly. I'm keeping my eyes on Lasbra. His ultimate's back up. Could maybe try and focus out Zapman, but he still has CC immunity from his own ultimate. I'm keeping my eyes on Panatom as well as Wrong You, Lasbra, and Ven. Very susceptible to a gank right now as well. This game is teetering on the knife's edge. Neutral objectives spawned up, Pyromancer and Gold Fury. We could see these teams try and split them out.
Wrong You will meet Jake in the midst of the jungle there. Both of these mage supports staring each other down. Awesome Jake now heading towards his own Lanos mask to get a little bit of that extra tankiness. He went with a Pridwin in his second slot instead. But immediately Jake gets rooted out inside the silence puddle, doesn't have to use his beads just yet. Instead, he'll drop the circle of protection, but he's got nowhere to go. The sanctified fields, and he gets basically nothing back in the way of healing. And it's Yarkor the one to shut him down. Zapman rotates over the Supernova, slams through the Hunter, and Zapman gets one.
Man, the Olympus Bolts are getting lost in these team fights. Jake gets caught out, immediately shredded, just through the circle protection. Doesn't matter, damage mitigation's not enough. Through the shell as well, loses his life. Barracuda tries to rotate in to separate the fight with the Sanctified Fields. Yeah, that does not work. The Leviathans were there in numbers and are able to shut them down and pick up the gold.
There's no way that Yarkor by himself is going to stop this. He is. Everybody has pulled off the Pyromancer, and now it will be the Leviathan. Yeah, no, you know what? I'm not even going to have to because he just does it. I don't know why I ever think there's no way that blank and then insert Yarkor's name here, you know, with teams dealing with him. Yeah, nobody's able to even try and keep this Chalk out.
No, Yarkor is nigh unkillable at this point, especially when he's got that ultimate available. Zapman on the opposite side of the map is able to strip away a tier 1 tower. Pyromancer, Gold Fury, both go the way of the Leviathans, and this gold and experience gap is only continuing to grow. This is tough for the Olympus Bolts. This is a team composition from the Bolts that really would like to be the aggressors on these objectives. It is very easy for a composition centered around an E-set to hold their positioning. It's a King of the Hill style composition in that, do you want to fight into a circle protection? Do you want to fight in to the death immunity of Centaurus? Fight in to a sanctified field? No. No, you don't. So what have the Leviathans decided to do here? They have been the aggressor. They have been choosing where the fights happen and forced the Olympus Bolts to fight their way in. These strong defensive tools, circle protection and sanctified field, are hamstrung when they are not allowed to have the defensive positioning. The Leviathans have been doing a very good job of mitigating the strengths of this Olympus Bolts draft.
We were talking about, you know, gross items to pick up, the Lano's Mask on the Nox. Talk about a CAD shield now for this Chalk. Already getting a lot of boosted healing from the power he's got. Give him just a little bit more there with that Caduceus shield picked up. 20% increased healing to all of his allied gods within his range, especially and including himself.
Man, I'm sure the Olympus Bolts would have loved to be able to pick up an Ankh or something along those lines, not just because the Chalk self-heal, Panatom as well, self-heal, Zapman, self-heal, double meditations from this squad as well. Ankh likely would have been able to apply that passive in every single team fight, but who generally picks that up? It's either going to be your solo laner or your support. And with Haddix on this Nike, you really want him to be able to pick up that blink to initiate these fights. That leaves it up to Jake, and ESET does not utilize Ankh very well. Again, a very defensive pick. Will not find himself alone in the backline of the Leviathans very often, so instead has been forced towards this shell.
Little do Leviathans know they're all standing on a ward. Haddix and Awesome Jake collapse onto Shinto. They get the beads out of the mid laner, and the circle of protection just gets them a little bit of health back, but not a whole lot of value from it as far as the healing and damage are concerned. But look at the triple ultimate burned out of the bolts for just Panatoms and one set of beads.
Man, Shinto just walks out of there. He saunters out. That's a lot of resources. Maybe I head back to base, regroup with my team, and potentially look towards the Fire Giant, because we're 20 minutes in, and the Leviathans have got themselves a significant lead. Whether or not the Olympus Bolts want to show up to the Fire Giant first to offset that aggression, yet to be seen. But with all these resources expended, it's going to be a little while before they're the ones making these proactive plays. We need to see more from Lasbra. These ultimates have not been connecting for the most part. When they have connected, generally beads out. The CC core of the Olympus Bolts is incredibly high execution. Who's forcing beads if it's not Lasbra? Is it Jake with a Spirit Ball, generally going to be single target? Is it Ven with Giddy Up? He's probably going to die for it. Is it Barracuda? We haven't seen a great Sanctified Field just yet either. The Olympus Bolts have got themselves an incredibly high execution draft, and it only becomes harder and harder to play around with this deficit growing.
I just looked down and noticed that Zapman was already level 20 and has already picked up his upgraded starter item, and putting a lot of pressure now here onto Jake in the mid lane too, alongside Shinto and Rong Yu. No towers have gone down aside from that one, or from the two tier 1s on the side lanes of the Olympus Bolts, and maybe the Leviathans want to complete that trifecta of taking out the towers by putting some pressure here in this mid lane. Haddix wants to get in there. He's doing everything he can to get into the midst of this fight, but Yarkor and Rong Yu are just zoning him out.
And that tower has taken a lot of damage, dropped down to 10%. The Leviathans, well, they could take their time. Just walk on up yet again, force out some damage, or poke your way in as well. Who's standing in the front line for the Bolts? They're getting rooted by Rong Yu.
And you want to talk about the freest CC combo, pin into Nox combo, just disgusting, and you have to depend on either your own beads or you got to hope that Ben's got a cleanse.
Lasbra.
But Lasbra's going to need more than just a cleanse. He's going to need help to get out. Back to the tier 2 tower he goes, and down goes the tier 1 tower. Leviathans crush that one, and they crush the dreams of the Bolts on defending their tower.
Man, that was a low commitment siege from the Leviathans as well. Just a 9 turns blessing from Panatom, and he's not done.
Jake goes in. Jake doesn't have his beads anymore. He has to use them. Circle of protection in the middle of 3, but he doesn't get much. But Ven gets a shot with the Centaurs to get some big damage through. But
Massive.
The ultimate from Rong Yu hits 3. Zapman in danger, has to Aegis to get away. Tries to get some healing back, but Lasper doesn't have the shot, but Barracuda does from downtown.
But check Yarkor in the back line. He may have gone too deep. The Olympus Bolts take the 2 for 0, and they want to fall back and take out the Shark.
I mean, who's hurting Yarkor right now? He's taken 10, 15% of his health while staring at 3 players from the Bolts. He's just walking wherever he pleases.
He is, and honestly, that's on me. Who was I to think that Yark was going to fall down there? The Olympus Bolts, though, are able to make a miraculous defense and overstay from the Leviathans, cost them a couple of their lives. This does open up the door for the Olympus Bolts to regroup. It's a 4-man grouping on the right-hand side, and still 5 seconds left on Panatom, 20 on Zapman. It takes about 15 seconds to walk from base to the Fire Giant pit. This could be a power play from the Bolts.
But there's no ultimates up just yet out of the Bolts, especially Awesome Jake, who's that one that's going to try and be the secure for this objective. But they do start up the Fire Giant. Yarkor is back behind the pit, and I'm not sure if the Bolts have vision on there now that they know he's there. But Rong Yu is in the front line, soaking up damage from Haddix and Jake, trying to keep these frontliners zoned out. Yarkor used the ult, but it's only going to land onto Jake while Rong Yu holds him in place.
Ven took a good deal of damage there on that trade, and the Leviathans do a great job of buying some time. Yarkor trades out 50% of his HP bar to get the Olympus Bolts off of the Fire Giant, but that'll be resustained shortly. So instead, the Bolts have to take the consolation prize. Pyromancer goes to the Chaos team, but the Leviathans, they're back in numbers.
At least something here for the Bolts' trouble with all of that they expended in the previous fight to not get as much. And that's at least going to bring them back up a little bit in that gold. It's nearly 5,000 that separate these two teams early on. 4,500 experience, which matters less and less as these players start hitting that level 20. But once again, a grouping of the Bolts by the Fire Giant.
And what was it we were talking about earlier? Defensive positioning favors the Bolts. If they are on the Fire Giant first, that is the Bolts at their strongest. And despite playing at a gold deficit, they're playing as if they've got the lead based off composition.
Addicts goes in. Yarkor gets a 4-man silence with the ultimate. Even Wrong You drops his to try and get some damage mitigation, but Barra is low and Barra is gone. Shinto manages to sneak a shot against him, but Zapman goes down to Venenu. Haddix is still bullying out the Hunter here. Shinto has to back away, but now Haddix is locked in place by that Shadow Lock out of the Nox, and Haddix gets knocked up by the turtle form, but he'll be able to make it out. Maybe, though, Yarkor goes in, and a pin onto Awesome Jake will get his beads.
Awesome Jake left alone, as is Haddix, and it seems like the Leviathans know who the easier of the two targets is. Doesn't matter if you're auto-attacking for 14 if everybody on the Leviathans is doing so, and Awesome Jake will fall down. But do the Leviathans still have the damage output to go towards Fire Giant with Lazarus so nearby?
Watch out for Laz. He got spotted because he did walk over that hive, and now over the wards. Wrong You goes in right away and gets the beads out of the jungler. Lazarus will jump over the wall just to try and pull them away from that fire and let the rest of his team start grouping up. Fire Giant down to half health. Venenu and Haddix in the area, and Haddix is going to be the first one to dive into the middle of the pit against 3 and potentially force a reset, but they haven't given up on it yet.
They're holding on to it. It's just Panatom and Yarkor in the pit. Haddix acting as goaltender here, won't let it go down easily. Finally, the reset comes through, but has Yark gone in too far alone? No, he's Chalk.
No, he's fine. It's not just Chalk, it's Yarkor here. Yarkor also a very safe, just solo laner in general for this team, but now his Bulwark of Hope has been expended, down for 50 seconds and waiting for this next team fight.
Fire Giant was repulled by the Olympus Bolts for just a moment, trying to buy time for Awesome Jake to make his rotation in. Again, that circle protection is still the strongest confirmation tool. Despite Lono's mask getting picked up, kind of hampering that damage output, I still believe that circle protection should be able to beat out the majority of the Leviathan's kits. Maybe Zapman able to challenge him for confirmation on the largest of the neutral objectives, but this dance continues. Both of these teams vying and jockeying for position. Zapman decides to break that stalemate. Primal Fury would go a long way for the Leviathans, and it seems like it's going to go their way uncontested. Now, once they rotate over towards subsequent neutral objectives, Pyromancer and Fire Giant, the Leviathans will be dealing more damage to that objective and taking less, making it even harder for the Olympus Bolts to fight in.
The Leviathans go ahead and ring the doorbell on the Olympus Bolts door and say, hey, we went ahead and got the Fury. I don't know what you guys are planning on doing for a while here. Maybe we'll just go towards the Fire Giant ourselves as Leviathans begin their regrouping on this right side. But Venenu is pretty far away from the rest of his team at this moment. His potential 4v5 power play could go in favor of Leviathans.
It could, and the Leviathans seem to be playing with that knowledge, grouped up slightly around the Fire Giant. It seems like both of these teams are really apt to look for these picks before they commit themselves to the objective proper. It seems like the Olympus Bolts, again, really struggling to find the value from Lazarus' ultimate. But it's not Lazarus' fault, to be sure. There are a couple of targets on the Olympus Bolts that could be burning away these beads, but looking at the Leviathan's relics, none have been burned, except for that Aegis on Shinto, and oh, yep, that's back. So now the Leviathans fighting at full strength, whereas the Olympus Bolts still about 20 seconds out from having all their relics available. You got to think that it will be back up before both of these teams group up around the Fire Giant. I gotta think that it's gonna be the Bolts aggressing.
Well, and as you're finishing that sentence, the jungler's relics do come back. Yarkor caught inside the pit, knocked up by the Fire Giant, but he'll be able to heal a lot of that damage back up very, very quickly here on this Chalk. 5v5 group up around the pit. The penultimate Fire Giant dance as we approach 30 minutes. It's gonna be even riskier to try and make these pulls around the objective.
Panatom blinks and uses ultimate on Lazarus, who avoids it deftly just by utilizing that leap. So a huge engagement tool lost to the Leviathans, and the Olympus Bolts have taken note.
Addix goes in immediately. Zapman is the target. Centaurus does slam 2 shots, but the Saporate gets Zapman out for now. A little bit more damage. Zapman almost goes down to that masterful shot, and so does Panatom. Circle of protection expended onto the jungler, but he's going to make it out alongside his buddy Zapman. But that leaves it only as a 3v5 here for the Leviathans.
Panatom will make it back to base, and Yarkor, still incredibly healthy, is able to create some space for Shinto in the backline. And the Olympus Bolts, yet again, not in a position where they could just look towards the Fire Giant. They've already used every single one of their ultimates. Instead, settle for the Constellation. Pyromancer goes their way, and the positioning is still good for the Bolts. They're healthy. They just don't have a lot left in the tank to fight with.
Maybe Zapman is thanking Venenu for not going that Bluestone pendant, because that definitely would have sealed the deal and taken out this magical hunter. But Zapman is back and healthy now, teamed up with Yarkor. And this Fire Giant continues to extend closer to this 30-minute mark. The enhanced Fire Giant will be the next one up here in just a few seconds.
And if you want to take note of how much pressure Yarkor has established in these team fights, that fight should have gone handily to the Olympus Bolts, but Barracuda is forced to play so far in his own backline that he can't follow up on a good fight. By the time Sanctified Fields was dropped, the fight was already over. The Leviathans had fully disengaged, but I can't fault Barracuda for where he's standing, because if he moves any further forward, Yark is going to slam him with a massive silence as well as damage. Panatom as well has very strong dive into that back line. So Barracuda's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. Does he want to play further up on the off chance that the fight goes as well as it did for the Bolts in that last engagement? Or does he play back and kind of play the odds of, well, the dive potential of this Leviathan's draft is incredibly high. He has to show that respect. This is a insane chess match between these two teams where one misstep cost you the Fire Giant, and when the knife's edge is this thin, Fire Giant could very well just cost you the game.
Stun onto Zapman by Jake, but will do basically no damage as there is no damage built, and he's dealing less, and Haddix also has to jump away as he gets locked down by the support of the Leviathans. Fire Giant aggroed for only a moment here. It's Wrong Yu who's starting it up. An immediate attempt of a burn here by the Leviathans, or maybe just a bait forward, as they can see Lasbra is by himself in that mid lane, but that ultimate does go a long way for these Bastets.
It does. Lasbra now starting to work his way forward yet again after putting that mid wave into the tier 1 tower of the Leviathans. Jake with a great Spirit Ball finds two.
Beads, or at least a little bit, is going to make sure that the awesome Jake can continue forward, uses that Wing Gust to hold out for the time. That double stun, man, you can only wish as a support, getting a stun like that, you've got some follow-up. But there wasn't a whole lot just yet. Instead, it's now Haddix going into the backline to zone away Shinto and Wrong Yu. Lasbra dives in, but everybody's still holding onto their ults aside from the solo laner of the Bolts.
Lasbra finds great claws onto 3, but takes maybe too much damage. Forced to use the beads defensively, but should be able to limp his way out.
Just got his leap back up. Ultimate in from Wrong Yu up against Haddix and Jake. Haddix will get locked down. Circle of Protection dropped by the support, and a Sanctified Fields out of Barracuda just to make sure the Leviathans don't go too much further forward.
Yarkor is still acting as that frontliner for the Leviathans, creating even more space. The Olympus Bolts have used it all. Every single ultimate lost out here. Zapman maintains his own, as well as the Blink and Beads from Lasbra. Beads lost by Jake as well. So two great targets for Wrong Yu to try and isolate in these next couple of engagements, whereas the Beads on the side of the Leviathans that have been taken, they're not super valuable. I'm sure Yarkor is just fine playing with his ultimate for CC immunity. Maybe more so is the Meditation lost out from Wrong Yu, the Ankh as well, Blink Engage lost from Panatom, but the backline of the Leviathans happy and healthy.
Right now, a lot of anti-heal stacked up here for the Leviathans. A Contagion is the final item for Yarkor. We had that upgraded Ankh earlier on and a Brawler's Beat Stick. So they're going to make sure that they get minimal value out of the Circle of Protection heal, minimal value for Barracuda's lifesteal and Ven's passive, and see if the Leviathans can keep the Olympus Bolt zoned out away from this Fire Giant. Puddle is dropped, but will not find anything. Instead, it's just Haddix doing just fine here on this Nike.
Everybody's just so tanky here. It's the most wild game of chicken. Who's going to chase out too far? Who's going to dedicate one of their lives to find the picks? Is it going to be a higher value pick than your own? As of now, the Leviathans, they're being forced back.
Haddix and Jake go in immediately. Wrong Yu not taking a whole lot of damage. He'll throw out the Death Ball to immune out a lot of the damage to resist them down. Yarkor is still fairly tanky. The cap does hit one, but it's immediately going to be purified out. Lasbra gets knocked up, and he has to leap away from the Leviathans. Wrong Yu goes in aggressively, but he doesn't find anybody with the combo after.
Re-engage, pins good from Panatom, but Sanctified Field separates the engagement. Zapman has to use his Aegis to escape yet another death trap from the Olympus Bolts, but it's the Leviathans standing strong in the pit of the Fire Giant, and the Bolts, they have to lick their wounds.
And the Bolts don't have a lot of sustain built in. There's no meditations for them. There's no way for them to get all that health back without the ultimate from Awesome Jake. And the Fire Giant started up one more time by the Leviathans to try and bait anybody from the Bolts forward. Jake is the lowest one on their team, and he's got to push himself to the back line alongside Lasbra, because all this damage popping out from Panatom is really starting to do a number on this jungler of the Bolts.
Barracuda slowly re-sustaining his team with this Ola run. So for the first time, the consolation prize of Pyromancer will go the way of the Order side team, but Haddix may have stepped too far forward.
Haddix and Jake both expend their ultimates just to try and stay alive. The shell has been eaten through. Yarkor dives in the back with a big ultimate, around 3 of them, but not a whole lot more damage. Lasbra dives in to try and get some damage on Shinto, but it's not enough. Instead, he gets turned on. Zapman picks him up. The cat, though, picks up Zapman and brings him right to the clutches of Venenu.
Panatom post-mortem is able to root out Barracuda, but he still had the Aegis available and will survive the damage. Then from downtown, finally shuts down Yarkor for the first time this game, and the 2 hunters on the Olympus Bolts maintain their lives through what could be one of the longest Fire Giant dances we have ever seen. 40 seconds left on the nearest respawn from the Leviathans. Take your time, Bolts. You can get a victory lap on the way to the Fire Giant.
I mean, we got to be pushing up 10+ minutes on this Fire Giant dance for both these two teams, and it's still going to keep going. Just because they killed 3 members of the Leviathans, the Bolts don't go immediately to the Fire Giant after the fight because of how low they are. Now, they have that opportunity to regroup, kind of recuperate some of their losses in the fight, and now start up the major objective.
Enhanced Fire Giant on the line. Wrong Yu looking to make the hero play. Has the ultimate available, but with Lono's Mask, not going to deal a whole lot of damage. This is a weighted coin toss for the Olympus Bolts, and, well, Nox ult's pretty easy to block.
Fire Giant not going to be hit by that ultimate out of the Nox. That'll be perfectly blocked out by Haddix. And finally, after, 11, 12 minutes around this dance of the Fire Giant, it's the Olympus Bolts who come out on top with an enhanced Fire Giant nonetheless.
So no longer will these structures have backdoor protections. The Olympus Bolts will not have to concern themselves with the minion waves and instead could just walk towards these permanent objectives. Tier 2s, they're going to burn fast. You've got a double hunter composition. There's no other way to cut it. The Leviathans, if they want to put up a defense around their structures, it's likely going to have to be outside of them. I'm talking in front. If you allow the Olympus Bolts to walk in on a Phoenix, on a Tier 2, it's pretty simple. Drop Sanctified Fields, all of a sudden time's dilated everywhere, and nobody from the Leviathans is going to want to fight inside of that. Failing that, you still have Circle Protection to create space. Lasbra's Displacement tool becomes stronger, and a simplified play space in the Tier 2, in the Phoenix, much easier. The line of sight is much easier for this Bastet to find any of these priority targets. The Leviathans, on the other hand, still have got some very strong defensive tools. Wrong Yu, Massive Silence Field, as well as single target CC, means that whoever walks in first from the Bolts is going to have to stand still for a considerable amount of time. Panatom's engagement simplifies as well. In the last couple of Fire Giant dances, we've seen him try and isolate Lasbra in the jungle. Now 9 Turns Blessing is, again, an AoE CC tool, likely looking for Ven and Barracuda in the backline. It's just whether or not the damage output of the Leviathans is a large enough AoE to follow up on some of these CC tools. That's one of the failings of having a hunter in mid. You're shredding, but you're only shredding one guy.
Zapman holding on to a 3k elixir on this soul as he's already full build. Venenu, interestingly enough, ends up his build with a Runeforged hammer, and then Shinto sells that Blackthorn hammer that he had earlier on, picks himself up a Mantle of Discord as we go into what could potentially be the last team fight of the game for these two teams. Zapman pops the elixir, Jake goes in, gets rooted in place instantly, and Zapman is shredding through him like paper, already half health on the support, and Haddix is getting slowed to eternity inside of the Phoenix. Awesome Jake is the one who eats the damage from Wrong Yu's ultimate. Barracuda locked down and immediately gets out thanks to the cleanse of Ven.
Phoenix does not take any damage in that fight, and the Olympus Bolts, they lose out on the death immunity for Ven and the secondary HP bar for Haddix. So instead now, on a 5-on-5 engagement is what we just saw, it's going to be a 4-1 split. Lasbra, acting in the center of the map, has to line up against Panatom, and this is a fight he's used to tanking. Both of these guys have been 1v1ing for the last 20 or so minutes. Why stop now?
4 versus 4 grouping up. Lasbra teetering back and forth between whether he wants to join this left fight or try and push that mid lane Phoenix. Jake and Haddix waiting for their opportunity to strike, or maybe just Haddix waiting for that ultimate to come back online, because otherwise he's down all of his defensive and offensive tools. Blink and Beads both gone. Jake will eat some damage here out of Zapman, but not a whole lot. Instead, it's Zapman who eats a big one and a big shot out of Barracuda.
Shinta takes some damage from Lasbra in the back, and the Olympus Bolts slowly working their way through this Phoenix. Draugr putting in a lot of work to keep it alive, but that's not permanent. It's going to fall off very shortly. The Leviathans have been doing a great job of slowing down this push, and we have not seen the Olympus Bolts try in earnest to take this Phoenix just yet. We'll know. That's when Barracuda drops the ult.
Jake gets rooted in place right away. Sanctified Fields out of Barracuda to get Yarkor away from the fight. And a circle of protection out of Jake to hold them out. But it's a first on pop through. Shinto finds Lasber, even with the Phoenix going down. But now it's the Leviathans on the chase. Vanadu has to beads away from the pin, but it's Jake and Haddix who get stopped down.
Massive.
And Jake goes down.
Haddix now straggling the behind, the front line, or back line rather, of his team. Ven and Barracuda acting selfishly, going to leave their soul laner on an island, and that island might just spell death. The Leviathans may have lost to Phoenix, but they take out 2, nearly 3.
It's going to be a barrier to hold them out. Yeah, we'll go ahead and make it a nice and even 3. Maybe a nice and evener 4 here. Barracuda and Ven. Can I actually get all 5
No!
with this one? Zapman slams them out with the Stellar Burst. And the Leviathans, who had the bolts knocking on their door at the Phoenix, right now just lost the game. It's only 20 seconds left on Lasbra. And the Atlantis Leviathans hold out at the Phoenix. They slam all 5 down, losing nobody, and they're going to take game 1.
You may have taken the Phoenix, but at what cost? The cost of your Titan. The Leviathans demand perfection. You have to play perfectly if you want to take out this team, and the Olympus Bolts nearly do so. A 20-minute Fire Giant dance nets the enhanced Fire Giant for the Olympus Bolts, gets them a Phoenix, but at the end of the day, it only matters which team takes out the Titan, and this time it's the Leviathans.
I cannot believe that after nearly 20 minutes of dancing around this Fire Giant, the Bolts finally were able to break through. They kill 3, they get a Fire Giant, they knock out all of the towers on the map. Then the one Phoenix that they try and go for, that cursed left Phoenix, and the Leviathans hold out on a defense, turn it around for a deicide, and win the game off the back of that one single fight.
It is not often in my casting career that games get my heart pumping, but I've got to be at 140 BPM right now. My heart goes out to the Bolts. It has got to be so hard to be that close to a victory in such an important set and have it stripped away as quickly as it was.
Well, Mifflin, that was just game 1. We've got at least 2 more to go for these guys here in this best of 5. We'll take it to a break, and then we'll come back for the desk for game number 2.
That's right, shop.smiteproleague.com. You can get the championship edition jerseys and match up with your favorite teams. Right now, the Bolts need your support, so maybe you go buy something for them. Of course, the Leviathans are more than happy. I'll also throw this out there. They won a game, so they get the official plug. They have a hooded blanket at shop.smiteproleague.com, and that's something that you could get for yourself that is very cozy. I love that blanket a lot, and I wish I owned one. But you can also go to hrz.io/SWC merch, SWC merch in all caps, and that will take you directly to where you will see all of this championship gear, not just the jerseys, but the joggers, and of course, this beautiful, beautiful mouse pad with all the team logos on there as well. It is all fantastic, all in one place, shop.smiteproleague.com or hrz.io/SWC merch. Of course, that comes off the back of a nice Leviathans win. You see the Bolts jersey right there. Again, they need the support right now, Hazer, because that one was a very topsy-turvy game. It was very back and forth, about, 15 minutes of Fire Giant before finally the Bolts get it, and then they get a Phoenix with it, and then they lose the game anyway.
Yeah, they worked so hard for that EFG. They grinded that one out for about 15 minutes, nobody doing any damage to anybody. Finally, they get some kills. They get the fire. It's all looking good. They push down. They get the Phoenix, and they all die and lose. So.
And Taco, I mean, that bounce back was like the dream for the Leviathans, right? Like you get a single pick. First off, there were like 3 kills in the last 20 minutes. It felt like it was just if you got that pick, that's all that mattered. And Leviathans, they found one, and then they chased them to the ends of the earth to get those kills.
Leviathans in a little bit of an identity crisis, because when you see a Chalk locked in, you think, man, this team really wants to have some fun. And then you see the Nox, and she's like the anti-fun god.
Yes.
So I'm not really sure what basically kind of compelled the Leviathans to want to run it down with this Nox strat, but if it was ever going to be good, that's what we talked about on the desk, and this was definitely the match to try and make it work. And I think that ultimately Rongyu's placements of his ultimates, as well as just that Shadow Root just causing so many problems for the Olympus Bolts. It just felt like they could never really commit like they wanted to underneath that sanctified field.
It comes out, it's again a weird day where I can say that in the SPL and Season 8, Nox has 100% win rate. It was right there. The Chalk looks pretty good for them. But it was, and something they highlighted at the very beginning of the cast, kind of weird, Hazer, because they load into the game, and there's 4 mages in the duo lane. There's been metas. We've gotten used to some mages making their way over there. But having all 4 of them hang out was definitely an experience, I think, for both teams to get used to.
Yeah, I wonder if that's something we're going to see again. Definitely an unusual one that I don't think I've even seen in my casual games this year. 4 mages, mage.
Don't worry, there's still like a month left, especially once Worlds ends. It's all up in the air.
I might skip some ranked queues for a bit. We'll see, because there's going to be a lot of ESET support and a lot of Nox support to counter it. But, I mean, you've got to give it to Rongyu. It's an inspired pickup, I think. It was really, really good into the Bastet. We saw a couple times the Bastet would leap over walls, try and get back out, but that silence field was straight down, so she would have to invest the beads into that. And, it's worked out.
Just feels dirty to say, though, that Nox was like a good pick.
Yeah.
Like, even though it's like with the caveat of into that draft, like it leaves you like, I need to wash my hands. I want to like wipe my tongue off. Like, it just does not leave me feeling right. But Taco, it just ended up working out perfectly for them. What do the Bolts need to change going into the second game, and what else do you have for this game and the thoughts?
Well, it's more so, I like that the Bolts are just trying to play their own strategies. I don't think that the Leviathans are necessarily a team that they're going to want to try and challenge as far as the drafts are concerned. I think the Bolts have historically always been a team where they know what kind of comps they like to run, and they tend to stick to that. One thing that I would like to see get brought back, though, is Venenu on that Chiron. I think that he actually had a really strong showing on the Chiron. It's just a bit unfortunate that in the grand scheme of things, the Bolts just fell short here, but it's evident that that Hunter mid pressure was definitely able to match up against that Almuz Cobb.
Well, the Bolts, once again, our second pick here, Leviathans. They're going to start things off. Well, hey, they don't need to change anything, right? If things went well for them in game one. Granted, it was a shaky things went well for them. It's the Odin ban for them into immediately the Kamazats one more time. The other side, it's Emoja again for the Bolts. And honestly, yeah, Emoja, Hell, even Artio, Hazer, I don't think I stray too much if I'm the Bolts.
Yeah, I think maybe the Artio is where we could see the change, if there will be one, which we might see come through here. On the other side, I think this is the exact same bans the Leviathans went for. No, we're running it back. We're running it back. We'll see what does change. Something will undoubtedly change during the picks. Maybe some changes in the bottom 2 bans as Leviathans grab that AMC, which will presumably be going in the mid lane for Shinto one more time.
Yeah, there's no world we end up with another Nox pick, right? I feel like that's going to be something that worked out very specifically, but as you had mentioned...
Caster's Curse.
Yeah, Caster's Curse, right? Just wait for it in about 5 minutes. Then you can mark that off on the SWC bingo. But everything so far is the exact same. Up to the Bastet Taco. I mean, this was, for the most part, at this point, the Bolts were still perfectly comfortable with everything they had locked in.
Yeah, it's a pre-recorded replay of game number 1 coming in for game number 2 so far. But as far as the Leviathans are concerned, though, they're not really the ones that have to stray too far from their original game plan, but they will for the heck of it anyway. Cirquet getting brought out relatively early on, but one thing that I think kind of shines about Cirquet in this matchup is that you can ult Bastet's Cats, and it will spread the poison effectively.
Yeah, that's something that's going to be an interesting dynamic to mention, but instead, you get that interaction, but outside of that, would the Erlong Hazer feel better here from what we saw last game, or is this Circuit just going to have to play differently? I mean, otherwise you're matched up with everything else that was around it so far.
I think the Circuit might be a flex as well. It could be going into the support role.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think I think it's almost more likely to go there. But Panatom does run it for sure. I'm in the weird situation here where I'm like, they're going to ban Nox, aren't they? They're about to ban Nox. Bolts are about to ban Nox.
What if they ban the Chalk instead? Because it would be a little bit chaotic as well. I think it always looks kind of crazy if you're banning Chalk or Nox, I think, in these sorts of circumstances. But I do think that combination of the double whammy, double silence was rather problematic there for Bolts' front line. I mean, how many times over did we see Haddix get his Nike ultimate preemptively forced out just because his HP bar is getting shredded down since he's locked in place? But Nox still just kind of lingering, I guess, in everybody's mind.
Like a bad smell.
Yeah, well.
Like she tends to do all the time.
You can tell. I think you can get the dynamic of what Nox is like. And most of the time you experience it in arena. Look, if I'm trying to chill in arena, the last thing I want to see is Nox on the other side. Either way, they do tend to agree with you, Hazer, a little bit, thinking that the Circuit isn't necessarily for the jungle, because it's Susano Daji banned out here by the Bolts. Chiron Osiris are banned out on the other side. Chalk's going to get locked in, but it's by the Bolts this time, Taco.
Well, you don't have to worry about playing against it if you just pick it for yourself instead. And I do think that Chalk, especially against a double pseudo ADC frontline, I mean, Sol, she practically factors in as another hunter here, even though she's a mage, definitely just a magical ADC. So it's all more or less the same. And for Chalk, having that attack speed slow as a rather effective part of his kit, I think, up against the Leviathans here. But does kind of play into the sense that all of this self-sustain is a prime pickings for a Circuit, whether she's support or intended for that jungle position. Leviathans can definitely look to just isolate one member of the Bolts with that anti-heal.
We were looking at Row here, but just a second ago was the full team for the Bolts. And they all look pretty relaxed, to the point where Jake, I would almost argue, had looked bored. He looked like he was ready to go to sleep at any point. Granted, we'll see what he's able to do. Probably not feeling too happy with the loss there. But going back to the E-set, again, something that treated them pretty well throughout placements, although what a wild world we live in where that's something that not only is it like a pick for the Bolts, but they're regularly going back to it.
Yeah, this is just, I mean, this is the most wild picks and bans we've had at a Worlds in a long time, I feel like. I don't remember the last one that I was as in awe as I am of this one. I wonder if we will see the Nox run back one more time by the Leviathans, or if they'll look for something else now that the Chak's been taken away. I mean, it's still a fairly decent Nox game, but maybe worried. And there's no Chiron for the cleanse this time, so I don't know. I definitely could see it coming through again.
I'm still trying to puzzle through what a fairly decent Nox game looks like. How to gauge the field to know when Nox is going to be worthwhile. Gilgamesh gets locked in here, and Taco, this has been a pick that we've seen very popular in the jungle. Feels like it should pretty much go there, kind of locking in what should be Sol Circuit as the dual lane, and now a Cerberus as well for the solo lane.
A little bit of a more traditional frontline feature here out of the Leviathans. In the Gilgamesh, again, I think a really strong flex pick opportunity for the Leviathans, because it could still be Gilgamesh support there for Rongyu, although I would definitely lean a little bit more towards the Circuit or even the Cerberus. But I like the fact that there is so much variety, and more importantly, the Leviathans looking to kind of negate a lot of that space control that the E-set and Chalk brought to the board originally.
And now it's a lot of options, specifically the Chalk Cerberus matchup. That's one, like, we've seen Cerberus, and for a long time, that's literally all he was. Hazer was just like, cool, you're playing something that either A, has healing, or B, has good control. I'm just going to lock in Cerberus and know that I can help shut down a little bit of that.
Yeah, he's definitely fallen off a lot as of late, but Chak seems like a pretty ideal matchup for him. Has the on-demand kind of leap there to get away from Chak's ult if he needs to. Yeah. Has the healing reduction here for both the ESAT, the Chak, and the Olaron. Has a little bit of healing in his kit and will probably be building some lifesteal. So going to counter out that healing quite nicely with Cerberus passive. As we see the last pick come through here for the Bolts. I don't know where they're going to go here. Will they go for an Olaron still in the Hunter role?
Yeah, I was going to say, who do they need? They need Vin's pick right here, right?
I would think so.
So Medusa gets locked in.
Ooh, could be Barra.
And this was something, yeah, when we were looking at it earlier, Taco, for the Scarabs, I was like, oh, right, Medusa feels like it should be mid, and yet they ended up throwing it over towards Stewart. Do you think this is going to be a Barra pick?
Well, Barra has been the one most likely to run it for the Bolts, but if it's an Amus and Cobb in the mid lane role, I think the Bolts are just trying to match that lane clear pressure. And even if it is Barra on the Medusa, say Zatman runs it back on the Sol, then I would probably lean a little bit more towards Bolts being able to establish that duo side pressure, because Medusa can definitely get the upper hand in that early laning phase clear and even have some really strong kill potential against the likes of a soul. But another key note I kind of want to make basically point out is the fact that Cerberus with that Stingent Torment, that Circle of Protections might not actually be protecting the bolts. Jake's going to have to be real careful about his placements with that one, because if everybody decides to sit inside of that ultimate, well, that's an ideal situation for a Cerberus.
And Cerb just goes, no, you're over here now. Have fun. We'll see what happens. I mean, it's a lot of fun damage there, but the follow-up, Hazer, off of a Cerberus ult as well, like that's something that's always easy to talk about, like Cirquette as well as the Cerberus here. Soul does a lot in a very small area, but she does a lot in that time. And that feels like that's going to be the deadly combo for the Leviathan.
I believe they call it the Barracuda combo. Is that right? Sol 2
Barracuda,
into
yes.
Sol ult. The classic. He invented
created
it.
that.
No one else has ever done it. Just him. And we'll see if Zapman can master it in this game, if it is to be Zapman on that Sol.
Since the dawn of time, everybody traditionally would just only Supernova first, and then use Stellar Burst after. But thanks to Barracuda enlightening the rest of us on the Barra combo, we can all now 2 before we 4. It's a great thing.
Barra's benevolence truly is it's just so kind to everybody, right? And he's opened our eyes to everything. I keep going, but look, it's so difficult. Every time I look towards the right side of the screen, the Eset's like front and center because she's just right there, and I want to talk more about it, but I don't know if there's anything more to say except for, I guess, team fight, right? Taco, you had highlighted the Circle of Protections and where they might end up being a little bit of a problem for the bolts more than actually helpful for them, depending on whether or not the Cerbolt is ult. But when you look at these team fights late game, are you feeling like the bolts have a distinct advantage, or is this leaning a little more Leviathans?
It all depends on how Lasbra is able to fare on this Bastet, because I think game 1, Leviathans did a great job at restricting his movements pretty heavily, and I'm seeing more or less a lot of the same. Cirquette instantly ult, Taunton, Gilgamesh, you got that drop kick, the Winds of Shamash, so it'll be tough for Lasbra for sure.
Well, we'll see whether or not the bolts can tie things up here, or if the Leviathans are going to take a 2-0 lead in game number 2.
All right, everybody, synchronize your watches here because we got Rongyu on Cirquette support. Go ahead and grab your timers, and we'll see how long he stays stealth sitting inside that mid lane, one of the coins of this player specifically on this god. It's game number 2, Leviathans and the Bolts, J-Mac, Mifflin, and Doug here to bring it out, and we do end up getting this Medusa back in that mid lane role, so it is going to be the traditional Hunter-Hunter matchup, but in the mid lane.
Yeah, and you know what? I would say that wave clear probably still favors Shinto on this AMC. He can just drop that wave clear from a good distance, whereas Ven on this Medusa is going to be very apt to look towards early engagements, pre-5 specifically. Really wants to get involved up against Shinto, has a good deal of damage output. The second Viper shot comes up, really. He's going to start winning those 1v1. So the Leviathans likely going to look to play safely around mid and have Shinto farm up. Oh, okay. That's just Leviathans holistically. That's not even just this draft. That's how they want to play, and they've built a draft around it incredibly well. Whereas the Olympus Bolts, on the other hand, essentially have a I'm salty, run it back style of draft. We're back on the E set, Ola run, even Lasbra going back towards that Bastet as well. But what did we see from Bastet in game 1? Not a whole lot.
Not much.
Not much from him. That ultimate really was not finding a whole ton of value. So this time around, I think the Bolts jungler has to get a redemption arc.
Well, this time we have triple mage and an assassin in the dual lane compared to the quad mages that we had last game. You know, and it's so funny, Mifflin, because I remember talking to Shinto in a pregame interview, or maybe it was a postgame interview one time, just before Phase 3 kind of hit, before we really got that assassin patch that came through with that like 8.9.
Best patch
And
ever.
I remember asking him kind of, you know, what are some of the things we might be seeing with this new patch? And he kind of alluded to Hunter mid way back then, but it didn't really come into fruition until these last placements. Maybe we got to see a little bit of it during that Phase 3 playoffs as well, but now we're really seeing that one come out strong here.
Just so much pressure, so much fight potential throughout the early portions of the game. Hunters and mid really have found their home at the tail end of this season, and maybe due in fact to just the raw mage ADCs we've been seeing as well on the other side. I'm expecting the Leviathans, and I said it last time around, Panatom likely going to try and make some rotations over towards Barracuda on this Oleron, even more so now on this Gilgamesh. Has some great displacement with a drop kick, Winds of Shamash, very hard to play around. Barracuda, again, largely a mobile mage on this Oleron, but in game 1, we saw the Leviathans do everything in their power to fight not where Barracuda was. If Sanctified Field was an option, they didn't want it.
Okay, well that's a quick beads out of Haddix there, out of the drop kick from Panatom. Lasbra goes in. Yorkor does have the jump to get away, but he'll be chased out by Lasbra and Haddix. The 2v2 in the solo lane. The breath comes through to slow down Haddix, and the meditation pulses from the Leviathans, and they'll be nice and healthy. Can't say the same for Haddix, as he's sitting about 30% health. Meanwhile, Bit of a scuffle over here in this. Wait, Wrong, you just stole that.
Yeah, Rongyu is built different, man. That guy is just a strange being. We could not reproduce him in a lab if we tried. Yeah, Panatom is just built different. Just a strange human being. We couldn't reproduce him in a lab if we tried. The Leviathan's getting dominance on the side lane buffs. So far, both blue and purple stripped away a significant win on both sides of the map.
And that's going to allow them to get a little bit of extra pressure in those lanes. Now Barracuda won't have that extra boost to the attack speed. Chalk won't have the same level of sustain, but thanks to his passive, he's not too worried about it. It's Zapman, however, who's eating the big brunt of damage here. Barracuda a little off the mark there with that first ability from the Yola run. Not able to get the damage out, but at least pushing them back under this tier 1.
Yeah, so now the Leviathans get to rest on their laurels and benefit from the fact that they just killed more minions than the Olympus Bolts. They just simply had more farm on the map because they stripped it away from their opposition, and we haven't seen a kill just yet, but Gold experience starting to rear its head slightly. We're getting very close to that level 5 tick over, which is going to be very significant, especially around Rongyu. This Surket can put a whole lot of threat on the map once that ultimate becomes available. Shinto just now ticking over, can start applying that cripple as well, but Ven has actually got the better end of that farm, level 6 to Shinto's 5.
Yeah, we did see some rotations from the junglers to other lanes, especially over that towards that solo side. So Shinto didn't get to have the same level of farm that Ven did right out the gate. But now with everybody getting close to that 5, Lazarus still hasn't been able to tick over just yet. And in fact, looking at second item here, Lazarus didn't even go to finish his mace just yet. Instead, he picks up a charge of Morningstar before going any further.
Maybe expecting a similar pacing of the game as we saw in Game 1. Just wants to get those Transcendent stacks online as quickly as possible. But I would think that rushing Jotuns would likely do Lazarus a lot of favors. The faster you can get CDR available on this Bastet, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Because if Game 2 is going to be anything like Game 1, it's just going to be Lazarus burning those beads, and it's just going to be Lazarus making use of those burnt beads. So, CDR, the name of the game.
It is another fight over here on this right-hand side, but not for the buff this time. Panatom will not walk further forward to try and grab that one. Instead, he just gets totem alongside his solo laner. It is a Breastplate of Valor out of Yarkor, so that'll give him the physical defense needed to try and sustain up here against Haddix. Ton of cooldown reduction inside him as well. That 20%, really a big boon for your soloing Guardians.
Yeah, meditation as well, so he's going to be very safe in lane. If Haddix ever decides to heal, he's also healing Yarkor, so you got to think that the 1v1 likely going to continue to favor the Leviathan solo laner. Haddix, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't necessarily need to win the 1v1 in this lane. It's more so about his ability to rotate out and utilize that ultimate to disrupt these team fights. Should be pretty easy to apply that Chalk ultimate to Shinto or even Panatom, considering Panatom has leaped in aggressively on every single engagement he's taken in the last 5 minutes, and Shinto being largely immobile could be an easy target for him as well. But the same is true of Yarkor. Once both of these solo laners stick to 12, could be curtains.
Asbra crippled out, has to use the beads. And the stinger was good from Shinto, but he won't go and pick that one up. So remember when Shinto was, you're talking about how he didn't have the most far. Okay, guys, get your stopwatches on. I was calling it earlier
like
as a joke.
you flipped the switch, man.
Seriously.
You got so excited.
I was joking about it earlier on whenever I opened up. Like, oh, he's going to send the mid lane. Not too long this time, only about 15 seconds. But that 15 seconds bought him enough time and got an ultimate out of Venenu. That Petrify now on cooldown.
Yeah, Ven's sitting there like, oh my god, he actually did it. He's actually just
He's an
in my
animal.
lane. Yeah, Rongyu is just you can't make this up, man. He plays weird. He's a weirdo. He's walking up, solo invading purple, doing it properly somehow, and then burning away one of the best team fight tools on the Olympus Bolts, at least in the mid 3v3. Ven, gonna be a little while till he can get involved. That's tough, especially considering Ven goes towards the Crusher early on. He would love to be fighting right now, and not super an option when you don't have that CC immune ult available.
Talk about an ideal quest item for Panatom to have gotten, a tier 1 cloak. And that Magi's Blessing could be such an important thing that he can grab for himself, or he can go towards one of those other cloak options. Zapman uses Supernova. Barracuda will rush him down and Disapparate. Just barely comes up in time to keep Zapman alive. Barracuda almost with the solo kill.
Yeah, we'll see if Zapman decides to stick around. A snipe could take him out. He has to play cautious here.
He's going to throw out the Stellar Burst, but Jake is now on the way, and I don't think he wants to stick around. Meanwhile, we have a 3-man rotation over to try and kill Haddix, and they will do so for first blood. The ticks, not quite enough, but Panatom does get it, and now Shinto has come over to help his hunter out. Awesome Jake has to drop his own ultimate just to get himself out. but Shinto, the good teammate, comes to help out Zap.
And Jake tries to stick around. He wants this purple buff invade, but he's playing with fire, and he gets taken down. Shinto says, you are not allowed to have this buff. Nobody takes farm for the mid laner of the Leviathans, and Zapman does not go back to base. He's still here. Do they want to fight Barracuda? I don't love your odds anymore. Jake tried, and he died.
Zapman is playing with the ultimate fire right now by sticking around this lane for so long. Jake rotated all the way basically from base as that initial solo fight began, rotates in, and then Zap goes, hey Shinto, you busy? Well, I'm kind of against the farm. Well, you want to get a little bit more farm? Oh, yeah. Shinto rotates over to help him get that. Not just save Zapman, not just secure the buff, but get a kill and put 2 up now for the Leviathans.
Just the hubris of thinking you could take away Shinto's farm. Panatom doesn't even take away Shinto's farm, man. Jake sticks around and pays the iron price, and now the Leviathans find themselves with a 2-0 lead and the exact same gold lead at this point in the game of Game 1, 1,500, favoring the Order team before objectives. This is massive for the Leviathans. Experience has been largely equalized for the most part. Support about a 1-level gap for Rongyu, but outside of that, about even everywhere else.
That might have been one of the first triple splits I've seen in the mid lane in a long time out of the Leviathans.
And Shinto hated it, I guarantee it.
He's mad. He's still up in net worth above everybody else, so he's still top. So he's happy about that. But the Bolts are not happy about this invade around the blue buff. 4 versus 4. The Hunters are on their own island while the rest of the team is fighting around this blue buff. Jake pulled back in. The stun is not good. Yarkor and Shinto take him out as the Stinger deals the final blow to Jake. And in the 4v4, it's the Leviathans who come out with 1.
Man, Yarkor, that stun, phenomenal. The Stygian Torment finds all the priority targets. Jake thought he was allowed to step up yet again. Unfortunate, you got slammed by the Honey, you got slammed by Rongyu, and you get sent back to base in a body bag all in one fell swoop, and it wasn't a cheap death either. It cost him his ultimate and his relic. So now Jake, susceptible to the exact same thing yet again. Silver lining for the Olympus Bolts, their buffs aren't up just yet, so maybe the Leviathans will leave him alone for a moment.
Well, Zapman, he does have his buff just about to respawn.
Lasbra
finally wants to get himself active on this left side. Zapman caught out Supernova and the separate. Get him out for only a moment, but Lasbra grabs him with the cat and finally able to make some impact on this left side. Barongyu is here, and he's not very happy about you taking out his Hunter, but there's not a whole lot that he can do.
Yeah, luckily for the Olympus Bolts, it wasn't Shinto again, or he would have been with a vengeance for that purple buff steal, luckily. But the Olympus Bolts are able to at least pick up a kill. Does cost Lasbra his own ultimate. There still are a couple of beads down for the Leviathans to try and exploit, but instead, it's a tier 1 tower stripped away in the duo lane. The Olympus Bolts strike first, but Oleron is not allowed to play very far up in that lane. We could see Zapman try and freeze it out.
Panatom stunned out. He wanted to get that wraparound drop kick in the mid lane, but Awesome Jake spotted him out walking through the minions and got a nice little silence to hold him back. So instead, Panatom will just go back to base. It is a Witchblade coming out of him, third item. He didn't end up finishing up that cloak. He's going to hold on to that in that tier 1 slot, but instead it will be that Witchblade picked up.
Yeah, very utility-heavy build here. I'm not sure if he picked up that first tier of the Shoguns from a quest or if he decided to purchase that one, but either way,
Had to have bought it.
Incredibly tanky, I'd say, at this point. He's got great utility. The attack speed of both Barracuda and Ven going to take a massive hit. Even Haddix, for the most part on this chalk, going to get involved with those auto attacks. Witchblade going to affect him pretty heavily as well. So the utility that Panatom is bringing his team is significant at this portion of the game. You got to think that the Leviathans want to utilize that while that power spike is still there. Lasbra, at level 11, does not have the luxury of having a secondary relic. Thank you very much, Doug. Rongyu, being a freak in mid. Now's the time to fight. If you're on the Leviathans, you want to get involved before Lasbra takes to 12.
There's no way Jake didn't just spot him. There's no way he hasn't been revealed yet.
It's tiny.
That's got to be a very, very small radius to see him get. He just watched 2 people
And he's still there.
clear a lane. No fear on this man. Will now jump in to find Awesome Jake. Hits him with the last breath. And it's just the bees from the swarm.
What?
And Shinto with the stinger obliterates Lasbra, puts him in the grave, and now Haddix the one on the run.
It's Ven still chasing out, separating this engagement. It's a 2v2 on the right and a 2v2 on the left. Rongyu acting as goaltender makes sure that Barracuda and Jake aren't able to rotate their way in. So the Pyromancer has been pulled by the Leviathans and immediately reset. 4-man grouping from the Olympus Bolts is enough to dissuade the Order side team. But with Barracuda making this large rotation to the right-hand side of the map, that creates the space for Zapman to close up that level lead. this Oleron had already established. Now 13-13 are these Hunters, and well, Zap's strategically placed a minion wave in Barracuda's tower.
Not just one, but a second one on the way over there. Zapman, or Barracuda, hasn't rotated back in to try and get that extra farm. Instead, it's Zapman picking up the Oracle Heartbeat, and the rest of the Leviathans picking up a Pyromancer. And this is something they do all the time, where they fight one big little team fight, they get a single pick, and they say, all right, that's all we need now to go ahead and take an objective. And what they do, they grab that Pyromancer. Wrongu jumps back in that mid lane, not stealthing inside the mid lane this time, as he had to use it, obviously, to get himself over that wall.
Just really intelligent macro play from the Leviathans. The second they notice Barracuda cross through mid, they say, all right, well, we reset Pyro, but the threat's not here anymore. Let's go ahead and pull it out yet again. Zapman puts the wave into the tower, goes immediately to the Oracles, gets that vision for his team, so the Leviathans don't have to concern themselves with a return objective from the Olympus Bolts. Barracuda misses out on the entire wave, and the Leviathans get the neutral objective on the right-hand side. Just clean, clinical play from the Order side.
Yo, last game they heard, hey, you guys like frontliners? Well, now Panatom wants to join this mix yet again, as it is a Shogun's Kusari picked up right after the Witchblade. So he's going to be boosting up the attack speed of his two big Hunter-style allies here. Wrongu goes in with a blink, Cobra's Kiss, and a last breath that Jake has absolutely nowhere to go, picked off and taken off the map.
Man, that just robbed in broad daylight. Jake's like, I was walking back to my car at night. I had all my homies with me. There's no way I get mugged on my own tier 1. But it's exactly what happens. You gotta bring a gun next time, Jake. You just don't live those. Wrongu says, hey, it's really cool that you dropped Circle Protection. Be super wild if you didn't heal, and he doesn't. And now the Leviathans, they start the goal.
4 around this Fury for the Leviathans, only 3 out of the Bolts. Haddock's a little late on his rotation over, and the Gold Fury will go to ease here for the Atlantis Leviathans. Not even an instance of trouble out of this team as they grab that one out. Funny enough, it was a Bluestone 9 damage tick that actually secured the last hit. Always a little fun to see.
God,
what ends
Shito's
up
got to
being
do
that
everything.
He really does. He said, guys, this has got to be my Fury. I know last hitting it doesn't give me extra gold, but I just got to imagine that it does. But sitting here top of the net worth chart, though, he's got a little bit of contention here. Zapman's right behind him.
Yeah, Zap's been free farming in the lane for the most part, aside from a couple of gank attempts from Lazra, who again has not had the most active game as of yet. Has seen a lot of Panatom leaping in, seen a lot of Winds of Shamashes, not too many cats from Lazra as of yet. The beads on the side of the Leviathans are always up. I'm not sure that we've seen them burn too consistently this game. 15 minutes in, maybe 1 or 2 uses by the entirety of the Leviathans. Somebody on the Olympus Bolts has to put pressure onto these relics. Because if nobody's doing it, when you round up, when you finally pony up for one of these team fights, well, they still have those relics. They still have those beads. Somebody has got to put some pressure out there. Maybe it could be Jake, but every time he steps up, he gets actually mugged. Barracuda can't do it on his own. It's got to be Lazra, maybe a blink from Haddox, but Haddox does not have enough damage output in his own right to generate threat, so he's got to do it with somebody with him. The Olympus Bolts just have not really built a draft that facilitates this Bastet too much. Nobody is setting up for that ultimate.
I've got a little advice for Awesome Jake that I learned many years ago
have
about
Jake
dealing with dealing with muggers. You have to establish risk control, and then you can take the gun away from them, and then you'll be good. So make sure, Jake, next time they walk up to you, just establish risk control, and you'll be good to go. But here, 16 minutes in, the Leviathans with a near 4,000 gold lead, up 5-1 in the kills, and it doesn't seem like they are ready to give up on any of this pressure. Sure, they haven't taken any of the towers, but they haven't really cared about it. It's all been about these neutrals. Pyros and Furies have been going their way handily.
Yeah, gold is looking good for the Leviathans, but the Olympus Bolts have been doing a decent job of mitigating loss. I'm going to talk over this fight because that's your core. Maybe if we see Lazra engage, I'll let you talk about it again. Experience has been completely even across the board. Junglers the same, mid laners are just about the same, maybe a 1-level lead in any individual role for the Leviathans is the largest that we're seeing so far. So the Olympus Bolts are certainly still in this game. One team fight that goes the way of the Bolts completely closes up the gap in this one. But the Leviathans have been stripping the objective, then taking the fight. Generally in SMITE, it's the opposite order, right? The order of operations are off here. But in doing so, the Leviathans have mitigated the risk of a lost fight. Sure, the Olympus Bolts might be able to take an engagement, get a 1-for-1 trade, or even a 2-for-1 trade. But what are they going to fall back to? Not the Pyro, not the gold. Those are already dead.
We've been talking about the utility style out of Panatom here, but he gets a tier 1 mace for his final item. Not quite sure exactly which route that he wants to go. I mean, he's got the pick of the litter between the 4 different maces. Do you think he's going to go for some anti-heal, maybe some, or I guess maybe a crusher since he already does have that Jotun's Wrath?
Yeah, I'm thinking it is likely going to be the beat stick, right? You just want to be able to mitigate some of that circle protection. Barracuda's got some self-healing. Even Lasbra does from the passive. Bastet now getting ability lifesteal just off the rip. So Brawler's beat stick should be able to find some value going forward. If he's feeling super confident, I mean, it's hard to argue against Crusher. Attack speed goes a long way for Gilgamesh, but I think that how Panatom's been playing, being the facilitator that he is, Brawler's beat stick is going to fit that much better.
We do see another set of Lono's Mask being started up by the supports yet again. They're able to grab those. Once it's a Sovereignty, though, out of Awesome Jake for some of that extra physical prop. Meanwhile, Rong Yu just goes with the straight health option, some CDR, but most importantly, that 40-second cooldown knockoff that the Relic Dagger provides. And that Blink and On are going to be up all the time, and he's going to put perfect use to it right up against Awesome Jake. This time, he's got some buddies at least helping him out, but Jake has to go all the way back to the depths of the Tier 1 tower just to get away from the mugging of the Olympus Leviathans.
That's Heavenly and Sprint expended by Awesome Jake, as well as the ultimate, so he's a sitting duck in this next fight. Pyromancer already respawned. The Leviathans can start to work their way over there. With desynced neutral objectives, they really do get to set the pace of this one. I'm keeping my eyes on Jake in this next fight. They've worked through his Kevlar, and now's the time to take his wallet as well. The Leviathans, they've got a vendetta against the rookie of the Olympus Bolts. Jake has not been allowed to play.
Jake has been very quiet in this game, and not to his own fault here. It's just he has been that primary target. Last game, he was able to make some very solid Spirit Ball stuns on 2. We saw a couple of those around the Fire Giant, but he just hasn't had a whole lot of follow-up, especially in these fights here. I mean, he lost 3/4 of his health on the retreat whenever Rong Yu blinked in on him. And Lasbra will just try and do anything he can to get some farm and maybe even more deny some farm from Shinto by stealing that red buff.
Yeah, the tilt factor has got to be taken into account here. Shinto hated that.
Shinto's seething right now.
Like a telltale game. Shinto will remember that. But the Leviathans have got to feel fine with the positioning on the map. They traded their red buff for a Pyromancer. I'll take the global gold every single day of the week, and that's not to mention the passive, getting additional movement speed on the way out of Fountain. But maybe more so important is that we have ticked over towards that 20-minute mark, which is traditionally when the Fire Giant becomes an option for both of these teams. The Leviathans have got significant grouping towards the center/right-hand side of the map. If they notice the Olympus Bolts go towards this Gold Fury, we could see the Leviathans shift their attention and try and make the cheeky play for the Fire Giant. But why leave it up to risk? Why leave it up to a coin toss? Instead, the Leviathans, looking to leverage the gold advantage and experience advantage that they've already net for themselves, have grouped up around the Gold Fury proper. Oracle Vision to the Bolts, actual Ward Vision to the Leviathans, and all 5 here from both teams.
There are few players in this league that will do what Rong Yu just did, which is walk up and stare down 3 people as a Circuit support and effectively force them to go away from the objective that his team wants to take. Primal Fury being shredded quickly. It will be leashed away and then picked back up. Zapman holding it. Haddix goes to the back line with a big ultimate of his own. But he's only going to get 1 with it. Otherwise, it's just the silence from Jake that holds the Leviathans back.
The Leviathans are just waiting for that Sanctified Field to get dropped by Barracuda. Once that is expended, the Leviathans disengage and will completely re-engage, spearhead the next segment of the team fight. Barracuda very wisely holding on to that cooldown, realizing that that really is the maneuver that shifts the tides of these team fights. Barracuda might just be the most important person on the map right now.
Rong Yu's blink is back up. He can make a nice quick beeline to the back line if he wishes to, but instead it'll just be Shinto getting some damage up against Haddix, and Yarkor doing his best to try and zone the backliners. Keep your eye on Lasbra. He's been fishing around this left side of the Fury Pit for the entirety of this Fury dance.
Zapman able to resustain himself back up to full. Haddix utilizing his blink earlier on with the ultimate was able to drop Zapman low, but you wouldn't believe it looking at him now.
Primal Fury started up and then pulled away immediately. Yarkor goes in, Haddix goes for the ultimate, but Zapman will immune it out with a supernova that's crashing down on top of Haddix, and Shinto with the stinger takes down 1. Yarkor finds Haddix, and quickly it's only 3 left alive on the Olympus Bolts, and that 3 may be no more as Barracuda is surrounded by the Leviathans and burned down.
Man, Lasbra just overcommits in that team fight, takes way too much damage, forces Barracuda to step forward, and Barracuda, to his credit, is able to find a phenomenal ultimate, locks down 3 members of the Leviathans in the entirety of the Sanctified Fields. which should only leave a bad taste in the mouth of the Olympus Bolts, because nobody on the Leviathans falls down in that fight. The fight may have erupted around the Primal Fury, but we were fighting over the Fire Giant the entire time, and well, there's still 3 dead on the Bolts. Gotta think this one's free.
It was a fake out. It was all a Fire Giant dance from the very beginning. Panatom tanking this one up with how much extra tankiness he has thanks to the build that he's facilitated himself with. And it will be the Fire Giant, 22:50 on the clock, going to the Atlantis Leviathans.
Gold experience all favoring the Order side team. Fire Giant gonna make it so easy to strip away these remaining towers, and there are plenty. Call them gold caches, because I do not believe the Olympus Bolts will be grouping up around these tier 1s. Maybe we see a soft defense on the tier 2s. We gotta see more, man. Lasbra has not been able to find his footing on this Bastet pick. He's dealing damage, but he's trading his life every single time. It's a leap in, he drops the claws, Supernova immediately. A stinger from Shinto forces out the beads and his life on the tail end. The facilitation for this Bastet has not been there. Have we seen a significant displacement just yet from that ultimate? I still don't think so. And we've got, what are we at? 60 actual human minutes of seeing this Bastet now?
One
time.
On Zapman, again.
In game 1 or
like,
game 2?
No, in this game 2.
Okay.
In game 2. So he's done it 1 time each game to Zapman under his tier 2 tower between tier 1 and tier 2.
Oh, that wasn't even displacement. He just lasted him.
Well, okay, fair enough. But that's the only real significance that we've seen out of the ultimate, is getting a single kill on Zapman 1 time in 2 games. 1 time each in those 2 games, I should say.
Yeah, just not ideal performance so far from Lasbra out of the jungle. He's got damage output. I mean, he's up there on the charts, dead center. I mean, he's a slightly higher than Panatom, but Panatom's not a damage dealer. He's a support.
Rongy's going to go ahead and mug Lasbra inside of his jungle. There's an ultimate that holds Panatom down, but he's not going anywhere. Lasbra, though, he's going right back to the fountain. Panatom and Rongyu team up to take him out, and now it's a 4v3 on this left Phoenix. They might not have the tankiness to try and go through this one, and Zapman lose out a nice bit of his health bar, but now the rest of the team is here. They can regroup and push down this Phoenix.
Yeah, Lasbra's dead for 40 entire seconds. The Phoenix will fall from 0 defense with the bolts.
Dark Core goes in, only finds 1, and Haddix will use a quick beat. Sanctified Field out of Barracuda holds them out, but Supernova is crashing through the backline. Barra has no health bar left as Panatom jumps in to take him out. Venenu slowed down, has to use the Aegis to try and delay as long as he can. He'll make it back to the fountain, as will Jake, but the Leviathans not quite as healthy as they may have wished for to try and go for this Titan.
Good stun nearly from Awesome Jake. Connects with Zapman, but instead he just walks his way out of there. The Leviathans may have loved to have go for the end there, but Lasbra will be rejoining the land of the living in just under 2 seconds. The Olympus Bolts maintain their base, but lose out on the Phoenix, and there still are 5 members of the Leviathans alive. A couple of them still have their ultimate somehow throughout the entirety of that team fight, and there still is an entire minute with this Fire Giant power play. Having already stripped the left side Phoenix, the Leviathans, it's all victory lap from here. It's all icing. Just pick up a tier 2 tower. Pick up another one if you so choose. Pyromancer can be the dessert afterward as well. This is a tough situation, a significant hill that the Olympus Bolts have got to climb from here. And the Leviathans, I don't think they're going to blunder, man. And that's what it's going to take for the Bolts.
3k gold in hand for the mid laner Shinto as he goes back to base so he can finish up his last item and then maybe even go towards his start item. No, he sells that Bluestone Pendant. Instead, will pick up a tier 2 cloak to give himself a little bit of extra defense in this fight. Otherwise, though, he's gone for a more full damage route than he did last time around.
He hasn't had anybody on him this game, has he? I mean, who's been diving Shinto? Nobody. Maybe Lasbra, but like, I don't know.
But Rongyu's always been right there next to him, so really, who's the real one getting ganked there?
Yeah, nobody. Nobody's getting ganked. It's just Lasbra, like, showing up with like a Nerf gun to a gunfight, all right? The Leviathans, they're going to go ahead and strip away one more tier 2 tower, and the Fire Giant buff will fall off. But in doing so, we see the Bolts still on the left-hand side of the map. Maybe the Leviathans can pick up this Phoenix. No. The Olympus Bolts are able to make their way back, put up a defense here, but that wasn't the goal. They were just trying to establish dominance, establish vision on the Olympus Bolts. And the Leviathans do so. Take the tier 2 in mid, take the tier 2 in right. Maybe just head back to base if they so choose and get ready for this next Fire Giant.
Bear's got to get back now. That Sanctified Field is going to be so big for them in this team fight, but he still hasn't gone back. He killed the wave, Now he's going for this Draugr that's going to be so delaying of him on his back. But it seems the rest of his team's able to hold out. What is he doing
He doesn't.
over here?
He doesn't want the Leviathans to know he isn't in the base. If he drops that, the Leviathans would commit onto the Phoenix. So Barracuda says, "All right, I can't do it. I'm caught here." If he drops the Draugr, he loses the Phoenix despite giving it additional defense. Now with the Leviathans having backed up, he could do so a little bit more safely.
He will. Go ahead and start it up, though. The Draugr is just kind of bullying him at this point, knock him in and out of the pit. And he keeps going
All right,
back
I'm
and
lost
forth.
now. I don't know what he's doing now.
I guess because the Leviathans are still sitting around this pit, I mean, they're around the Fire Giant now, but Barracuda has been literally sitting on this side of the map for over a minute, trying to deal with this Draugr,
he's delaying it for the
trying
Fire
to
Giant
deal with
push.
this wave. But now he is holding on to it for now. He'll start clearing out those minions while the Leviathans whittle away the Fire Giant's lonely health bar. And that objective stands no chance against the might of Zapman. Draugr now goes down same time, so they'll have it for this defense.
Yeah, so he waits just to make sure that once the Fire Giant siege starts up, they will have that additional defense for their structures. Left side, Phoenix will be respawning very shortly. Barracuda at least able to keep those waves pushed up while he was waiting to drop down that Draugr, but the Leviathans still are playing with house money at this point. Nice play from Lazra to strip away some of that CC immunity from Panatom, but you just gotta think, even with that Draugr, a Soul and an AMC are gonna shred a Phoenix.
Zapman's going in by himself. He doesn't have those backdoor protections removed just yet because the minion wave hasn't made its way in. Rongyu and Panatom again grouping up by themselves in an opposite lane and forcing a now 2v2 fight over at this mid while it's a 3v3 on the right-hand side, and Haddix is losing that battle. He's already lost half of his health.
And Zapman may have lost out on half of his, but he's got the resustain to just go ahead and heal up and fight yet again. Lazra forced back to base. Rongyu now has the flank, and the right side Phoenix is dropping low.
Haddix goes in with the ultimate, but it's a supernova out of Zap in response to the CC immune himself. Shinto pops the beads, and Circle of Protection is down. The orbs out of this Hunter are not doing enough damage. Jake is picked up and thrown to the wolves of the Leviathan. They grab the support instantly.
Meanwhile in mid, Lazra losing a 1v1 up against Panatom as well as his Phoenix. On the right-hand side, that Phoenix has been left exposed as well. Take a peek at the left. Maybe that could be your silver lining. Nope, minions got that one. Every single Phoenix stripped away, and Jake dead for 40.
Dark Horror the only one low on this Leviathan squad as they look towards this Titan. The last objective standing in their way from closing out game number 2. It's now 4 versus 5 out of the Bolt. Jake back up in 23 seconds. But the Leviathans are playing so patiently. Yarkor waiting to resustain himself with these minions.
Does not have the minion wave to walk in with him, but does not need it. That Titan is
Nanu?
burning quick, but then faster.
But Nanu is gone. A drop kick against the wall is all that it takes to kill out the mid laner. Zapman loses the 2v1 that he got caught inside of. Lazra gets the credit for that one, but the Titan is going to go down, and the Leviathans are going to close out game number 2 nice and cleanly.
Man, that was a tough one. I was not expecting any of the games to be as one-sided as that one was in this set, especially considering the pacing of game 1. The Olympus Bolts lose their footing early in this one. Awesome Jake, again, mugged multiple times. Actually kind of wild. Maybe you want to call someone about that, but if the Leviathan's going to keep playing like that, I think we can go ahead and wash them of the stigma of maybe high-stakes sets aren't their thing. Seems like high-stakes sets are their thing.
Yeah, here in the one high-stakes set that really matters to get them moving on towards Worlds, the Leviathans are up 2-0 in this best of 5. The Bolts, can they turn around in game 3? We'll take it to a break and see if they'll find out.
Something a little more tried and true in the Ica video. Oh, that's a lot of damage onto Veronica. There's no chance for the Morrigan. And the Leviathans will answer back, make it 1-1, 7 minutes in.
Oye, siempre ha sido el gran amor. Chaya. Sin fuego, adiós, me voy para La Habana. Ah. Sin fuego, adiós, porque me da la gana. Es la verdad, oye. Sin fuego, adiós, me voy para La Habana. Adiós, goodbye. Sin fuego, adiós, porque me da la gana. Bueno, mira, escucha. Tenemos una historia tú y yo. Me conoces desde que era niño. Ey, y siempre ha sido el gran amor. Y no sabía nada más vino. Pero ahora tengo que cambiar mi vida. Y por eso yo te tengo que dejar. Y en serio no he buscado otra salida, porque yo quiero ir a La Habana a cantar. Eso yo quiero, me voy, oye. Sin fuego, adiós, me voy para La Habana. Sin fuego, adiós, porque me da la gana. Sin fuego, adiós, me voy para La Habana. ¡Ja! Eso es. Sin fuego, adiós, porque me da la gana. Bueno, mira de nuevo. ¡Ja! Y siempre te voy a extrañar. Claro que sí, porque por muchos años era mi vida real. Oye, y cuando regreso yo te voy a dar, te lo juro, un regalito bien bonito de la capital. Pero ahora tengo que cambiar mi vida, y por eso yo te tengo que dejar. Y en serio no he buscado otra salida, porque yo quiero ir a La Habana a cantar. Sí, es la verdad, por eso escucha ahora. Sin fuego, adiós, me voy para La Habana. Ay, me voy para La Habana. Sin fuego, adiós, porque me da la gana. Goodbye, my friend, sin fuego. Adiós, me voy para La Habana. Adiós, adiós.
Hey there, SMITE fans, Agro here. Look, every single year, the SPL just keeps getting better. Season 7 was incredible, and in Season 8, I'm sure our players are going to take their game to the next level. But in order to do that, they're going to need the best gear they can get their hands on. And that's why I'm so excited to announce that the title sponsor for Season 8 of the SPL is Alienware. Yeah, that Alienware. Our players are getting the best of the best in computer gaming. These Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition PC setups are insane. Not only will these be the PCs that the players will compete on once we are in studio, but Alienware is also providing one for each player at their home setup to make sure their practice is as good as possible. Now let's get down to brass tacks. The specs on these Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition desktops are amazing. An AMD Ryzen 9 16-core processor.
That's a lot of cores.
That's plenty of processing power.
Plenty of cores.
If you want to stream, this is the way to go.
I know a lot about my cores, so. I mean, Pilates, right?
64 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM.
What? Is that true?
That is true. I mean, this thing has 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM.
Which you can do literally anything with.
Literally anything.
I've never had more than 16 gigs.
That's quadruple the amount I have at home.
And one of the hottest commodities in the PC world, an NVIDIA GeForce 3090 graphics card.
Insane how much better this is than what I have.
The best graphics you really need, Ultra, of course.
Content's gonna look good.
What's the point of all the power if you can't see it? Players will also be using the Alienware 25-inch 240 Hz monitors.
Man, when I load into scrims with this bad boy, I'm gonna feed so hard. And it's gonna be in perfect picture quality.
We are so excited to be partnering with Alienware for Season 8 of the SMITE Pro League. And the best part is, this VIP treatment, it's not just for the pros. You too can get the best possible SMITE experience. Just go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW to get special discounts on some of Alienware's best products. Thanks again to Alienware. Make sure you're following them on Twitter and Instagram. That's at Alienware on both platforms. And you can join their community at alienwarearena.com.
E-set, more like easy set. That one's courtesy of Hazer there for you. It has been clean from the Leviathans so far. 2-0 for them. And if you watch the last one, well, there wasn't a whole lot of resistance to slow them down. The second kill the Bolts got was at the very, very end. And in typical Leviathans fashion, it was Zapman died so that the rest of the team could prosper. Very fun. But of course, this weekend is still powered by Alienware, of course, our title sponsor here in Season 8 for the SBL. And Agra just gave you a ton of good advice. If you go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW, you can get discounts on fantastic products. But if you are someone who, well, wants to just get a fantastic product, you can enter a giveaway. Go to twitter.com/SmitePro and you can enter for an Alienware M17 laptop. These things have a 2070 graphics card, which I am not kidding when I say that's better than what's in my PC, and a 1 terabyte SSD, which is an insanely expensive piece of technology to have in anything, let alone a laptop here. It's got a great display and a really good CPU. This is a great laptop. So again, go to twitter.com/SmitePro and enter now for your chance to win that one. And of course, thank you to Alienware for being the title sponsor this year in Season 8 and of course powering the World Championship as we are in it as right now. The Leviathans lead 2-0. And Hazer, Taco, the Bolts need to change a whole lot if they're going to continue in this World Championship run. But right now, Hazer, it almost feels like the Leviathans are giving them a little bit of payback for last year. I mean, this has been 2 incredibly clean games.
Yeah, really clean. I mean, game 1 was a bit more of a slog, but game 2, the Bolts just never looked like they were anywhere close in that one. I'm starting to feel like Shinto, like whenever I see someone dying, I'm seeing this AMC stinger sticking out of them as they fall to the ground. I feel like that might be a good idea to take away here for the Bolts.
And Taco, I mean, you pretty much called it exactly encounter for encounter. It happens several times throughout that. Circle of protection, cool. Hardcore walks up. Hardcore says no. Jake dies.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to try and play around that E-set ultimate because while it's notorious for being a huge objective controller, you don't get to control the objectives when it's constantly being burned off cooldown due to that frontline pressure that the Leviathans were just barreling into Jake with. They did not let him move in the slightest, and every single circle of protections that we saw come out was followed almost always by Jake's death, and that just left the Bolts with such a steep disadvantage that entering any sort of team fight in a 4v5 situation is never fun, but it's even less fun when, say, you do have that E-set in the 5v5, but they would burn out his relics, they would burn out his ultimate. So then you just have this mage hanging out that doesn't deal damage, has a difficult time applying her crowd control, I think, against the likes of what the Leviathans have drafted for, and, well, Benita, Yarkor, Vrongu, they all just kind of had a field day.
Yeah, they did more or less exactly whatever they wanted throughout this game. There's been getting stun locked there towards the very end. I'm frightened of this team, though, because when you think about it, so we already have seen Hardcore swapping over to the duo lane. Actually, we can hear the SBL Leviathans tweeting out, stop picking E-set. And if they could read, they'd be very upset. We'll see whether or not they take that advice. And of course, the Bolts replying to it, making some fun for themselves. Granted, they only have one more game to try and do so. And this is where things get, again, frightening for me. I look at Shinto. He's 5-0-4 here on this AMC. Now, we know Zapman as an accomplished carry. We know that Hardcore has done it this year. I feel like they just could swap whatever, whenever they want. Like next year, if there's some silly game, they could just shuffle all across the board. And I don't think they'd really look that much worse off. It feels like, Hazer, everybody can play anything.
Yeah, they might be the best team if we do some kind of, shuffled out roster thing. Nobody can play their own role. We swap them out and we see who really is the best Smite team. I think my money might be on the Leviathans right now. They seem to have Hardcore, Shinto, Zapman, can do it wherever. Zap was maybe going to go jungle at the start of the year, if I remember right, as well. So
Zap's been trying to play jungle, though, since, like, Season 4, to be fair. So I kind of take that with a grain of salt.
Season 9, baby. That's going to be his plan. We'll actually have to see. I guess depending on how this weekend goes, they might just coast and continue. As of right now, they're probably pretty happy with the way things have kicked off. The Bolts looking to swap things up, and they already have picks and bans for game number 3. The Bolts are going to be first pick this time. Now, the bans the last few times have been Odin, Camazot's Achilles for the Leviathans. It's been Yamoja, Hell, and RDO there for the Bolts. And they are at least going to keep one of those things true right now, Hazer. They get rid of the hell, but first pick at least opens up a different conversation for them.
Yeah, for sure. They can now take away one of the picks that the Leviathans is valuing highly. Even if they want to keep the same bans, they could, for example, first pick this AMC, take that away from Shinto. An interesting thing is I feel like teams who come into this event not playing Hell and feel like they need to permaban it are really handicapping themselves. I feel like teams really should have worked on that and picked that one up. If you're so scared of Shinto's Hell, you should have one yourself and you shouldn't be having to ban it on both sides.
Yeah, being able to control that, or at least first pick it here, would be such a boon towards them. Odin does get banned out. So far, a lot that has been similar, but the Amus and Cobb Taco gets taken away this time by the Leviathans, not wanting the Bolts to pick that up, especially considering what we've seen Vin do it, I think, just recently at placements.
One big concern here, though, is that, as Hazer already pointed out, not having the possibility of taking the hell for yourself does put a little bit more pressure, I would say, into this first pick priority out of the Bolts, because Leviathans, they have the choice now, Bastet, Olarun, Soul even, are arguably so, but also looking at that Achilles, I think that those are all 4 picks that we've been seeing Bolts and Leviathans definitely place some preference towards in their initial picks and bans, but Bolts, they can only get 1, if any, and it's going to be the Camazotz, so Leviathans are essentially in a world of whatever you take, just know you're giving us back 2 more, and I just am not sold that the Leviathans are really all that pressed about losing out on the Achilles.
No, yeah, with the Achilles getting locked in here, you have to wonder what the Leviathans are thinking. Like you said, maybe not too pressed about it at all, but this is a world, and Hazer and Taco, I actually want to think about, or ask both of you this, because Artio has been banned against the Bolts. Nobody else is playing it. Yet it still feels like something the Leviathans could lock in here, Hazer. Is that is it something that you can even prioritize, or do you not even look at it?
Well, REO, is it not banned by the Bolts this time? Take it away one more time from Hardcore.
Oh, yeah, it's right there. Never mind. I'm blind. Don't mind me.
But it is just Hardcore's signature pick,
meme.
right? Yeah.
It's the SMITE Pro meme. No, it's, you know what? It's because I've got this beautiful alien where I have it written on the laptop. I have no excuse. It was literally right in front of me. I don't know why I decided to glance over it. But let's ignore that question then, and instead talk about what matches up well into the Achilles.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. We could see the Nike. One thing that people do like the Achilles in that matchup for is he can execute through that Nike shield. Shields, the health that's on a shield does not count towards your total health at the time. So executes there at 30% threshold. If you got 29% HP and a 30% shield, you're still executable. And you can interrupt that rend as well on the Achilles, but the Osiris, something that we saw Solo Troll do a lot of work on coming out here for the Leviathans, could be a flex as well. We have seen that go jungle in the past. Shout out Captain Twig.
You know, I was going to say, but there's a Bastet, and then I remembered that even today we saw Bastet solo, so I can't even actually use that as a foundational argument. But it is something that is a little, I don't even know if I want to use outlandish. I think we saw Panathom like earlier this year play the Bastet a few times, Taco, but ultimately with the Osiris here, I mean, this feels like some top-tier picks that are going the way of the Leviathans, and definitely comfort picks at that.
Yeah, if Benitham was playing Bastet, it would likely have been against a set where Scream was involved. That's probably the only player that I would imagine would ever really entice a team to want to take that Bastet before the rework. Now with Bastet's reworks having gone down, definitely a very potent pick here. Almost in any role, honestly, but the Osiris kind of alludes to the fact of fighting fire with fire. I mean, Osiris has a lot of laning pressure. It's same way of matching up against the Achilles, and it seems as though the Bolts, they're looking for pressure of their own because it's something that they have definitely been lacking in these first couple of games.
Now, this has been an interesting conversation to have, but Gilgamesh, you know, well, actually, you look at all 3 of these. We've seen Gilgamesh, Achilles, and Serket in 3 different roles each throughout the year. That being said, Gilgamesh has almost always found a much more comfortable home in the jungle. Achilles can kind of swap, but with the Serket locked in here, it feels like this is finally the shy away from the E-set for Jake, right? He's going on something that he can be a little more proactive on.
Yeah, Serket as well, something I think he's had a pretty good year on. I think it's probably been his second best pick outside of that Yamoja, which he's not going to be getting in this set. It looks like a Norwal Rongyu. Both supports here definitely be really strong on that. But Serket, a pick that allows Jake to be mischievous, let's say. He can get in there, he can kind of be out of position, and he's so slippery that he can survive. And being such a really strong mechanical player, I think supports typically haven't been as mechanically strong as Jake is. He can really take advantage of that Cobra's Kiss and hit 2 targets with it, taunting them together, and then getting a massive Deathbane off.
That's been where a lot of the wins are. Might be matching up against a Fenrir, of all things, going up against it. Taco, I mean, the assassin, like, you roll back to what was it, season 6? Well, that was a huge deal, but it feels like they had fallen off until recently. Now, all of a sudden, picked back up.
Can't really say I'm too surprised. I mean, Leviathan's reigning cats and dogs with the Bastet Fenrir pickups, but I almost want to see Bolts run a more again. I actually think that there's a lot of ideal transformations. We know that it's a pick that Venenu definitely has looked incredibly strong on, and when your back's against the wall, the way that I think the Bolts are kind of pressed or corralled into this corner essentially by the Leviathans, they don't really have the luxury of trying to hold out on any sort of strats. I mean, they're right now looking at the potential of not even making it to semis or having that World's contention if they can't pull away a game win here.
This is not necessarily a comfortable spot, I think, for the Bolts whenever Tiamat's locked in. We'll cover that in a second. The bans, though, to catch up on them. Chiron, Soul taken away by the Leviathans, limiting down a little bit more of Vin and Bera. On the other side, it was the Heimdall and the Uller. And again, Heimdall feels like it is, a shoe-in for Zapman, but the Uller definitely has been a Shinto special as of late. But now you've got, the Tiamat added into the rest of these. What feels like it's going to be Zapman's pick is what they're waiting on here. But this Tiamat has treated Shinto pretty well throughout the year, Hazer.
Yeah, definitely been one of the premier Tiamats in the league. He's played really strong on it. There's a few guys that have played it really well. Baronic, definitely showing he's up there with Paul, Big Man Tings, and of course Shinto in there as well. Taco, I think, mentioned that the Bolts were looking for pressure this game. Discordia, perfect pick for that. If they want to play around the side lanes, you can get that passive onto one side and just chain invade and chain invade and chain invade. And the Disco will be quite happy to just AFK farm away in mid. I quite like this pick here.
And the Izanami alongside that Discordia. Taco, this has been like the pick to go to if you want to just be able to find pressure in the duo lane early on.
It's outright pressure here for the Bolts across the entire map spread, but as strong as I think Disco can enhance those side lanes, I also think that as far as that early game is concerned, she's a little bit vulnerable, especially against the likes of a Bastet, Fenrir, Osiris. That is such a heavy dive composition from the Leviathans that could definitely pose a lot of issues here, depending on how the Bolts are able to play around it, because I'm seeing a lot of burst, but the crowd control definitely still a little bit more favoring of the Leviathans.
And this is a fight that makes things a lot more interesting. Fenrir runs in, grabs somebody, whether or not he gets the beads, that's going to be up in the air. Bastet's ult goes out and grabs somebody. I mean, you've got essentially two Ragnaroks in your favor. A lot of beads burners there on the Leviathans, along with, as Taco had just said, a lot of CC to back it up. So you get some of that Hazer early on. It feels like there's going to be some struggles for the Bolts throughout a lot of the team fights.
Yeah, definitely going to want to have CC immunity in your kit, which I guess is good for Discordia, but Izanami,
she's super stoked about it.
Yeah, she's buzzing. She's got that apple, An apple a day keeps the cats and dogs away, maybe. Doesn't quite work.
Not as well.
But Izanami here definitely could be vulnerable. That passive from Bastet as well, going to spot out Izanami if she goes into stealth. No way away there. That new passive, it's basically like an Arendite for Bastet all the time whenever she hits you with abilities.
Pretty cool.
Hey, that feels pretty good.
Yeah, you got to watch out.
Well, they get all of that and then some. Now, instead, let's try to... I got to hype up the Bolts, right? Like, it feels very heavy. We've seen 2 good games from the Leviathans, 2 wins for the Leviathans, a really solid comp for the Leviathans. Taco, where are the Bolts winning this? What is their draft going to be able to do?
This is definitely going to centralize, I think, pretty heavily around that mid-support jungle dynamic, and I think that that's something that the Bolts, we've seen glimpses throughout the earlier portions, not so much in Game 2, but Game 1 for sure. I think that was where we saw a little bit of the benefits of Jake on that Ascent, but it's just got to be the mental bounce back here for the Bolts. This is, I think, kind of one of those matches that can basically indicate how well a team is able to mentally recover from some of those earlier game losses.
And that is going to be, I think, the test of this. When we watched them play up against the Dragons during the SWC placements, they went down 2, they fight back 2. Unfortunately, they ended up losing that last one. We'll see whether or not the Bolts can kick off the start of a reverse sweep, or if the Leviathans are going to end up answering back from last year's World in kind. They are up 2-0 as of right now, with a draft that the desk seems to love a little bit more for the Leviathans. We'll see if they can close it out here, or if the Bolts will put back a fight in Game 3.
Leviathans, they're up 2-0 of the Bolts, and they are 1 game closer to going to the semifinals, where they'll have to face off against the Camelot Kings for their opportunity to get into those grand finals. And what a shift up in styles here that we get in this third game, where it was the Hunter mid, the Magical Hunter over in the duo lane, all these assassins. Well, I mean, we're still getting a lot of the assassins here. But we kind of go back to a more traditional style, putting the more traditional mages over in that mid lane.
Yeah, now we're just playing SMITE. Just tried and true. As old as SMITE is, you've got this style of draft, but you gotta think that this Leviathans draft, man, I hate to beat a dead horse, but I'm with the desk, man. I really do like what the Leviathans have got for themselves. They've built a team that is going to burn beads pretty consistently. Yarkor can do it with the tether. Zapman can do it with the ultimate. That one's a little bit more iffy. Ragnarok always going to find that single target. Panatom always going to find that single target. Even Shinto, to a certain extent on this Tiamat, should be able to burn away some of those defensive relics. So I'm expecting Panatom to have a better showing on this Bastet than what we've seen from Lasbra in games of past. But with that being said, you gotta call out the Olympus Bolts where they are. I think this is a draft that fits their style much better. I think that Lazarus going to have an easier time performing on this pick. He's going to act more so as an initiator for his team rather than that kind of like side lane, tried and true assassin. You've got Ven to just boost up, likely Haddix on this Achilles. He's probably going to have that passive for the majority of this game. And then Barracuda's playing a pick that just establishes pressure by existing.
A little bit of a skirmish in the mid lane right away, but it's just to get those minion controls and to try and establish some pressure for these left side Harpies. There will be the Bolts who can grab the mid Harpies on the left. Leviathans will go ahead and default to the ones on the right-hand side. You know, something that the desk actually brought up that really kind of holds a true point. You know, they essentially do have two Ragnarok ultimates on the sides of the Leviathans. They have the actual true Ragnarok out of the wrong U, and then they have a ranged Ragnarok, which might be the scariest thing I've ever said.
That is pretty spooky, but maybe spookier for Shinto, who's dropped down so low off of this engagement from Lasbra. But in doing so, doesn't really get too much besides a bit of Shinto's HP bar. Defensive relics held on to here. But Shinto's going to have to play it a little bit safely in this lane on this Tiamat. Once he ticks over to 5, once he gets some of that damage mitigation from the scales, then Shinto could start playing aggressively yet again. But Ven's been getting the better end of these trades. The Strife's been finding their home. The Unruly Magic has been putting out so much poke. It's going to take a little bit for Shinto to get to a point where he's allowed to take these fights, especially with Panatom essentially completely shifting his style. He's no longer that initiator like the Erlong Shen or the Gilgamesh. Now on the Bastet, it's all about damage.
Very conservative play over here in the duo lane. Neither support really wanting to jump in to try and get any initiation going. Instead, they'll just farm up the lanes nice and casually with each other. Go ahead and get their own respective buffs. We're not seeing too many buff invades aside from where Haddix attempted to go for the blue. And Yarkor's the one caught in the middle, drop kicked against the wall. He doesn't have anywhere to go. When he needs the tether stun to come through, he'll get it somehow. Yarkor able to squeak by, and so will Panatom. He makes it out. But I can't say the same for the blue buff. That one should go to the Bolts.
Man, Haddix just clowns Yarkor in that engagement. Slams him with a stun, dodges out all the return poke with that combat dodge. That Achilles pick is putting in some work already, and now the Olympus Bolts, potentially for the first time this set, are able to establish some pressure in these side lanes. Blue buff invade goes their way, and Yarkor is just going to have to play without that additional mana for a good long time, especially considering it cost him his meditation as well.
Yeah, the meditation being down is never going to be fun for these solo laners, or at least for this solo laner in particular on Yarkor. Loses out on a lot of that extra self-sustain that he has because of it. Whereas Haddix, he just presses that 2 button, gets a whole ton of buffs, and one of those big ones being healing whenever he slams some of those abilities down. And now over back to this duo lane still, being fairly passive. This might be the most aggressive that we've seen the duo lane, and it was literally Zapman walking forward to land 1 Viper shot.
And that Viper shot swung, all right? Viper shot got hands. Barracuda has to put some respect on Medusa going forward, but this is to be expected for the Olympus Bolts. Now that Haddix has got a lead in the solo lane, you can expect that he should be getting the better end of the majority of the engagements over there. Izanami should be able to establish pressure over Medusa. There will be a tipping point eventually where Medusa gets the better end of some of these 1v1s, but that's a fair ways off.
Well, blink for blink out of the supports. Awesome Jake really wanted to get the ball rolling over in that side of the map, but he doesn't get it just yet. Waiting to see where Laz and Panatom decide to strike first. Will it be in the mid lane to try and shut down a mage, or will it be over in the duo lane to try and get a pick on one of these hunters?
With the pace that the junglers have taken so far, I think Panatom is very just apt to sit in the jungle and continue farming. It's up to Lasbra to start establishing that pressure throughout the early portions of this game. If Gilgamesh is going to sit in the jungle and farm, Panatom's going to do the exact same thing, but he's going to scale harder. So you need to have the Bolts jungler force some fights, force some engagement, start rotating towards this blue buff, and force the hand of Panatom.
Well, they're going to try and force a blue buff on this right side. The Bolts have grouped up as 3. Rongyu looping around the backside of the fight to make it an even 3 for 3. But even with Shinto sticking by, he could make a rotation over, but that would mean that Shinto loses some farm in mid lane. We know that's not going to happen, and neither is this blue buff invade out of the Olympus Bolts. They're just going to instead default themselves over to the Scorpion that just spawned.
Yeah, curious to see the Bolts let off the pressure there. Maybe with Rongyu starting to make that rotation, they didn't love their odds in that fight, didn't want to fully dedicate themselves to that invade. Sure, you've got a slight lead in solo, but hi-rez is not so dominant at this point of the game that he could just walk into the majority of the Leviathans. Worth noting, Yarkor already made his way back to base, so Blackthorn Hammer finished up for the Leviathan soul laner, whereas the Olympus Bolts, hi-rez, has not had that opportunity just yet, and he's just sitting on that Shillelagh. So despite having a level lead, right now Yarkor might get the better end of a trade.
Yarkor will go back up and be able to farm his right side. Should get pretty close to that level 7 mark on that next wave. hi-rez just needs to go back to base in order to try and pick his up, because I imagine he is sitting on a fair chunk of gold in order to do so. But it's going to be Scorpion on the left side for the Leviathans. The Scorpion on the right went the way of the Bolts. So they'll even out and kind of net neutral themselves with those 2 different golden XP pools.
But with Ven posturing for the invade a little bit earlier on, with Shinto getting the Shinto treatment, which is Panatom won't take his farm. It's just refuses to do so. Yeah, that's Shinto's. It belongs to him. He wrote his name on it. He put it in the fridge. You can't touch it. That has established Tiamat a 1 level, or about a 75% of a level lead. He's been sitting comfortably at 8, whereas Ven just now ticks over. That means that Panatom's been spending the majority of time in the jungle. If this is an argument of which team is going to scale harder into the late game, considering just about nothing has happened on the map in the last 6 minutes, I still make the argument that the Leviathans are going to feel much more comfortable in these late team fights. I really, really want to see the Bolts try and throw their weight around right now. hi-rez still playing with a lead, and you've got a more aggressive early game jungler in the Gilgamesh. You got to play with your power points, and right now that's it.
Well, Lasbra is walking forward, but he's not going to go too far. Instead, it's hi-rez at the forefront for his team to try and get this blue buff away. Panatom uses his leap to get away from the Bolts, but maybe a re-engage in. Double stun out of Rongyu does pick up Lasbra, and a dunk in by Yarkor to chase down the warrior, to chase out the jungler, but the drop kick holds him in, and the cat will hit the wrong target. Instead, it's the executed from hi-rez just to get himself out. And even with all the fights, with 3, make that 4 ults if you're including Shinto's there expended, no blood spilled.
But blue buff invade does go the way of the Bolts. They are able to strip away that buff. It was not cheap by any stretch of the imagination. Both hi-rez and Lasbra lose out on their beads there, so that double Ragnarok, as has been coined by the desk, just works. It's just going to work on the next rotation. That could be that we see the Olympus Bolts slow down a little bit, don't look towards this next blue buff invade, or it could be that the Leviathans try and expedite their own pace. They try to get involved on the Olympus Bolts side of the map, figure out where Lasbra is rotating towards, or you know where hi-rez is. Maybe a little bit harder to shut down the Achilles at this point, but still certainly an avenue in for these guys. Once Panatom's ultimate's back up, once Rongyu's ultimate is back up, you gotta be worried if you're an Olympus Bolts fan.
If I'm looking at the mid lane and I'm seeing the items that are coming out, I'm just going, it's been a long time since we've seen these before, because before, it's only been these magical hunters coming out, so we don't see the things like Divine Ruin, Chronos Pendant popping out of these mid laners anymore. It's been the hunters that have been coming there, or those magical hunters in duo. So it's nice to see those items coming back. And it's always interesting to see what routes these Tiamats go in their builds. Do they go for these full pen? Do they go for these full CDR builds? Well, at the moment, Shinto's going for double pen.
Yeah, very standard from Shinto here. Worth noting, we are playing on 8.12 right now. This is the patch where a lot of these standard mage items got some pretty nice power buffs. Obsidian Shard feels a lot better. Spear of Deso as well.
Rongyu not feeling too hot in the middle of 4.
Yikes.
The ultimate Ragnarok able to get himself enough distance. The execute off the mark by hi-rez. And Rongyu was able to leap back in the tower to get away. All of that expended. The support still makes it out.
Man, Rongyu plays that so well. Early cancels the Ragnarok so they can jump over the wall, make sure that he doesn't take any additional damage from auto attacks, survives the poison from Awesome Jake. That was a lot expended by the Olympus Bolts. And what's it cost Rongyu? Just Ragnarok, really. Blink's going to be coming up in just about 8 seconds as well. The Leviathan's still playing with the power point, and still 20 seconds left on Lazarus beads as well as hi-rez's. Stripping away the Ragnarok does make it a little bit harder for the Leviathans to act on that, but you still have got Panatom's ultimate, and, well, he's looking for it. Lazarus spots him out.
They get Ragnarok, cool, but I mean, look at everything that they use. They use the Execute out of Haddix, they use the Golden Apple from Ven, they use Last Breath and a Blink, all to try and kill the one support, the one dog, and they couldn't even get that just yet. So big advantage there for Leviathans come the next fight if they choose to break it out immediately. I say that, and we're staring at the mid laners that are here for these two teams. And I don't think there's a snowball's chance in heck that we're going to be seeing that happen.
No, and those beads are back and available for the Olympus Bolts now as well. 10 minutes in, the Olympus Bolts tournament on the line. You can see that it's weighing on the decision-making despite the Bolts finding a quick footing in this one. They've kind of slowed it down since then. Don't want to give themselves any unnecessary risks, and the Leviathans are a team that you might just have to make some risk if you want to beat. Gotta break some eggs to make an omelet. And the Leviathans, given that line of safety and given that time, Zatman's been free farming. Shinto's been free farming. He's still about a half level or a level or so ahead against Ven. I want to see more from Lasbra. Been a very quiet performance from this Gilgamesh so far. Generally only seen him get involved around these blue buff invades. There's an opportunity to do so yet again, but he is slowly starting to hit that point, Gilgamesh that is, where his damage scaling is taking some major hits. We see him go a little bit more so towards the utility, Blackthorn Hammer in that second slot. The additional HP going to help out Lasbra a lot with DPS as well. Just a great item to pick up on Guild, but we've already got double pen for Panatom.
Well, we saw this earlier on. Wrong Yu uses the ultimate yet again, leaps over the wall, but Lasbra says not this time and throws the Wind to Shamash over the wall to catch him. But now it's Leviathans turning everything right back to the Bolts. The Execute, the Fatal Strike isn't going to get enough distance. Yarkor dunks on his head to get one. Lasbra stuck under the tower trying to juke away from Panatom, but now Panatom is going to go down because he steps a little too far, but at least Yarkor is able to make up and get a double of his own.
Why didn't Panatom just jump back? My man just walked through the tower. He just tanked it the entire time. Gotta think that Panatom could have just left that scenario, leaps in, doesn't even get the kill for himself, maybe tanking up for the rest of his team, but the Leviathans still do come out ahead on this engagement. First blood goes to the Bolts, but the majority of the blood goes to the Leviathans.
Shinto's farm, or I should say, the Olympus Bolts farm is now Shinto's farm. He solo invades the red buff. A little bit of help from Zatman walking over to establish some pressure, but after 11 minutes of basically nothing happening as far as kills were concerned, we finally get that first blood to spill, and what was it, a 5-kill bloodbath in the jungle, and that's a 900 gold lead to Leviathans, but most importantly, 3,700 XP, and literally nothing was happening until just then.
Just a complete shift from what we saw in Game 2, where it was the Leviathans establishing a very early and large gold lead, but experience stayed largely equalized throughout the map. The opposite. Now the Leviathans have got a very slight gold lead, but a ton of experience on some key targets. Got a level in the solo lane. Yarkor was struggling early on. No longer the case. Has 1 on Haddix. You've got 1 in the jungle. We just now see Lasbra tick over towards level 12. You've got 1 in mid still. Well, I mean, it's going to be a little while until Awesome Jake gets that second relic available as well. Wrong Yu has got a lead there, and we haven't had an opportunity to talk about the duo lane too much because Zatman and Barracuda have just been idling by over there in the long. Something that I'm sure they're used to doing, having matched up against each other for going on 10 years now. But you got to think, which one's going to have the higher impact once they rotate out of the lane? Is it going to be Barracuda with already moving in towards some of that crit, has that silence in the ultimate, or is it going to be Zatman with that massive CC ability with the ultimate? Very interested to see how these two teams would like to play around these duo laners.
And no matter how many times that you say we're getting close to a decade between these two players against each other, it's still difficult to process in my mind that we're at nearly 10 years that these two have battled against each other in that long lane. Wrong Yu was a little caught out there for a moment, but it is Wrong Yu. It's almost kind of like talking about Yarkor at this point, where you almost kind of just expect Wrong Yu to get out because he's done it almost 3 times now, twice for sure.
Yeah, but even this time in not escaping, Wrong Yu eats so many ultimates. Lasbra has one of the best team fight tools on the side of the Bolts, and he's forced to throw it out over a wall just to finish off the last 100 or so HP of Wrong Yu. In doing so, in taking so many resources from the Olympus Bolts, Wrong Yu post-mortem essentially wins the team fight for his team. The Bolts did not have much left in the tank to continue that engagement, and the Leviathans take note.
Wrong Yu blinks in with the Ragnarok to bait the ultimate out of Venenu and get the leap out of Awesome Jake. So while he won't come up and steal any relics out or pick up any gods, he'll at least get a critical team fighting ultimate with that golden apple burned away from Venenu. And maybe now the Leviathans can start posturing up around an objective. Zapman, as I say that, him and Panatom cheekily steal away that little Gold Fury no one on the Bolts even noticed.
Bolts are going to take notice eventually and grouping up around the Pyromancer, but Rongyu's made the rotation. Yarkor is here. I don't think this is going to be easy for the Bolts, and they reset.
They're going to go on top of Rongyu yet again, but the Golden Apple is down this time, and the winds of Shamash used very early in the team fight. And once again, Yarkor and Rongyu alone are able to push back 3-4 members of the Bolts away from yet another objective.
All right, we're 15 minutes in the game. I've seen it enough times now. I don't want to see the Bolts utilizing all of their tools trying to shut down this Fenrir. Killing a Fenrir jungle already pretty difficult. CC immunity as well as movement speed additionally from his ultimate, 2 leaps basically. Doing so against a fully stacked Thebes Pridwin Fenrir, 15 minutes of the game, you're just wasting resources at this point. The Olympus Bolts, in utilizing Jake and Lazarus' ultimate, again, attempting to shut down Rongyu, have lost the ability to make proactive plays elsewhere on the map. Had they just allowed Rongyu to walk away, they would have kept their ultimates and the outcome would have been the exact same.
Pyromancer one more time by the Olympus Bolts, but there is a nice and deep sentry ward staring right there, at least for Jake to get some vision if anybody goes through. Rongyu does pick up Awesome Jake, but it seems like the Bolts will be fine, potentially giving up their support, but they don't even have to do that just yet. Panatom goes in to try and find the leap, but it's a quick leap out. Execute is here for Haddix if he needs to use it, and he will not indeed get it off there. It gets body blocked out. Panatom makes it out just barely. Rongyu turns the fight around. Laspra's gone, but the Winds are able to at least trade it out.
Barracuda left alone. Zapman, credit for this kill. Can Ven make his way out? We've seen some miraculous escapes. Not the case. Yarkor picks up yet another one. And, well, Haddix, can you get out? I'm not sure.
Zapman is here. Jake comes back after the brutal beating that he received earlier on. But they instead will not go for the dive. They'll just take the Tier 1 tower. Leviathans lose the Pyromancer, but they kill 3. They kill the Tier 1 tower. And they might even just be able to get this Tier 2 tower. Look at the tiny little bump on the graph that goes there for the Bolts back their way, and Leviathans immediately spike it right back down. 5,500 gold, 10,500 experience.
That may be a massive upturn for the Leviathans, but it was by no means a clean play. Panatom overextends, trying to finish off a kill, unsuccessful in doing so, but miraculously survives thanks to some phenomenal body blocks from Rongyu. Meditation from Yarkor as well. Just make sure that Panatom has just enough HP to get out of that engagement. And what happens? That baits the entirety of the Bolts all the way into the Leviathan side of the map. Barracuda acting as a frontliner. Yeah, that's not going to work. He gets shut down. Lasbra blinks past the entirety of the Leviathans, tries to finish off Panatom with Winds of Shamash. For what is potentially the 3rd time this game, just trying to utilize that ultimate for a last hit. Does not have quite enough damage. Costs him his life as well. The Leviathans, they come up huge there, but that was thin margins. Had anyone on the Leviathans had maybe just 50 less HP, we would be singing the praises of the Bolts right now.
Rongyu, because he's been in that level 12 threshold for a while now, he went back and got a fully upgraded Sunder and a Fire Giant just past the 18-minute mark here for the Atlantis Leviathans. And Haddix isn't even willing to walk forward to this. The Leviathans are just going to get a Fire Giant, and the Bolts are just going to try to kill Rongyu again, and they're just going to be unsuccessful one more time.
I don't know how many times the Bolts are going to try it and it just not work. I mean, Rongyu is just going to keep doing exactly what he has been. This is more valuable of a Ragnarok than him picking up anybody on the Olympus Bolts and having them killed. He is burning that many resources. The Bolts are just butting their head into this wall.
I mean, it's 3 ultimates again by the Bolts. The same 3 ultimates they tried last time, that they've tried the time before and the time before that to kill Rongyu. And once again, they come up fruitless. Barracuda at least is able to get a Tier 1 tower on the left side of the map, but the whole right side has now been stripped away. All the mid towers were taken earlier on in the fight by the Leviathans before that Fire Giant even happened. And now it's only one single Tier 2 tower left. And the Bolts may not even be able to put a defense up because of how much they keep expending for Rongyu.
Yeah, this is just tough, man. The Olympus Bolts I mean, they're only really getting the opportunity to go onto Rongyu because he's creating that much space, but you got to think to yourself, why is Rongyu standing here? Why is he willing to take these 1v4 engagements? Because he knows he has the capacity to survive these fights every single time. I said it in jest slightly that maybe if Rongyu just picks somebody up with Ragnarok and kills them, that it would be less value, but the more I'm running these numbers in my head, the more it sounds right to me. If he's burning 3 ultimates just by existing on the Bolt side of the map, I don't care if he's trading out Ragnarok and both of his relics. He's done his job as the support to act as a lightning rod for aggression on his team. The Olympus Bolts have just got to stop taking that bait. Either put some damage into him without committing your high value resources, I'm talking about your ultimates and your relics, or walk past him. This Fenrir isn't doing enough damage at this point in the game where you have to put that much respect towards him.
Yeah, at this point, Rongyu is walking up to the Bolts, and the Bolts are saying, I took offense to that for you even being near me. They try and do something, but again, they come up fruitless. Spectral armor now for Rongyu, so cancel out some of that crit damage that Barracuda's been building up into, which Barracuda hasn't really been a part of a whole lot just yet. 0-1-1 on the Izanami. Hasn't really had the opportunity to try and make an impact against Rongyu. But now that Rongyu's going once again towards this Lonos mask, it's going to be even harder to already kill the guy you couldn't kill.
Yeah, Rongyu is just, he's just doing it all for his team right now. The Bolts, I think, going to take notice very shortly. I doubt we see them commit that many resources yet again, but I said the exact same thing at the 15-minute mark. Leviathans now with Fire Giant on 5, only have about a minute left with this power play, should be able to try and mount 1 siege of the Phoenix, maybe this left-hand side. If we see a split push, I'm imagining a 4-1 where you allow either Yarkor or Panatom to act as that solo agent. Not sure anybody from the Bolts likes their odds in a 1v1 up against either one of those guys. But the longer the Leviathans wait, the higher the chances are of a Bolt's resurgence here. Only 50 seconds to play with on this Fire Giant.
Well, it's a 3-2 split, and they put the solo jungle over on that middle Phoenix to try and hold in. Rongyu leaps in place thinking maybe he can bait something out of the Bolts, but now just waiting for the minions to get back to try and do some damage to this Phoenix. Meanwhile, the other 2 members of the Bolts now joined by Shinto, going to try and get some pressure established towards this mid-side bird. And they're doing a decent bit of damage too, and the golden apple onto Rongyu, and he'll take that apple every day of the week.
Rongyu tries to walk up and just force resources by threat of Ragnarok, stands near every individual member of the Olympus Bolts on the left-hand side of the map, and the Bolts call his bluff. No pre-beads from them, it's only Ven who expends the ultimate, so that might be the lowest value Ragnarok we've seen from Rongyu this game.
That's wild.
And it still is incredibly good for the Leviathans. Fire Giant will wear off, so the Olympus Bolts weather the storm, the initial storm, if you would, but afterwards, looking at the aftermath, no towers left standing, Gold Fury's already been stripped, Pyromancer taken away, so the Leviathans can go ahead and just head completely back to base, don't have to worry about any return objectives from the Olympus Bolts. Normally, I'd say at this point in the game, 22 minutes in, you've got plenty of scaling ahead of you for the Olympus Bolts, but I'm not sure that they're going to be given that opportunity. Generally, the Bolts would love to be able to sit back and just play defense going forward, but looking at the gold, looking at the experience, the clock as it stands right now, I don't think the Bolts are allowed that opportunity. I think they have to step up to this Fire Giant and try and put up a defense. If not a defense, at least a steal attempt. Send somebody in there that you're willing to trade out, who isn't making massive impact plays. Maybe you can send in Jake, he goes for a miracle steal. Even Lasbrook can toss out that wins a Shamash. But you just have to make something happen because they are bleeding out quickly. This is a death of 1,000 cuts.
The 11K gold in climbing. Who cares about the insane amounts of experience? I mean, if people are starting to hit level 20 on the side of the Bolts. But with the Fire Giant coming back in, the Leviathans won't have any contest towards it. Zapman and Panatom and Shinto can take as long as they need to shred this objective down. They won't take much time. The Leviathans get yet again another uncontested Fire Giant, and the Bolts are once again on the back foot as they've got to defend against now all 3 of their Phoenixes.
All relics available to the Bolts except for Blink on Haddix, and all ultimates up as well. So this is as strong as the Bolts are going to be on this defense. The Leviathans have decided to forego the split push, and instead, they're going in as 5.
Barracuda has already taken some poke, and so is Haddix. Lasbra opening up the door to maybe try and make a path in the back, but it's Wrong Yu going to the carries. Yarkor dives in the back line, and Wrong Yu is finally getting a lot of damage thrown his way. This might be the first time they can finally get a big pick onto the support. They get him down, and now Panatom is low. Lasbra able to pick that one up and make it a 2-for-1 trade, and maybe a third if Haddix can find Shinto in the back line, but Shinto able to peel himself out, and a drop kick will be the last thing that Lasbra gets to do. It's the last thing that the Bolts may get to do here, because it's now 3 versus just Jake, but Jake might have enough CC and damage to hold them.
Zatman dropped low here, but it won't stop him for long. The Leviathans have got their eyes on the Titans.
Triple kill for Shinto to end game 3 and send the Olympus Bolts packing. The Atlantis Leviathans get a clean sweep here in our second set of the day, and they move on to the semifinals.
What a dominant performance from the Leviathans in this set. Game 1 was not indicative of the rest of this set. The Bolts put up a strong battle early on, but from there, the Leviathans' download was complete. They knew exactly what the assignment was, and they turned it in with an A.
I mean, if you want to just go back and, kind of replay one single play from the game multiple times, well, it was every time they expended 3 ults to kill Wrong Yu, and this is the first time that the Bolts were able to do so. The problem is they expended all those ults to kill Wrong Yu, and then they had nothing left for the team fight after.
And even the target calling in that last team fight was leaving something to be desired from the Olympus Bolts. We saw Zatman get drop kicked into the very back line behind the Phoenix, did not have the dash available. Beads was already used in that engagement, but nobody turned to look at him. Zatman was dead to rights with his positioning, but instead, he's just shooting auto attacks in the back of the Bolts and cleanly finds a win in the team fight.
And Shinto felt very little pressure to start that fight. Felt it a little bit later on the end when Haddix finally dove into that back line, but at that point, the Bolts base had already been broken open. Their spirits had been broken, and Game 3 goes over to the Atlantis Leviathans. A nice, clean performance out of them. They finally really break that playoffs curse. They break that big tournament curse up against this team, and they move on to face the Camelots tomorrow. We'll take it over to the desk one more time to close out the set.
Here, escape is at least the answer. Variety stunned in place, but he's missing half of his health. Yarkor takes it as well. Now range damage, my goodness. The 1v1 duo. Oh, the A gets used on time from Nitroid, but Satman's got the wave. 1v1 to the old man, and the Leviathans will pick up another.
Olympus Bolts are going home, and the Leviathans get to move forward to face the Kings tomorrow. A fun set from them. And this one was a little more contested overall from the Bolts, but ultimately, Taco, the Leviathans still looked clean in every single fight. After a while, it was how many ults are getting used on wrong you. That was how many kills the Leviathans were about to get.
And the conversation that we just had in the break room might have been the best breakdown imaginable. It's just, after a certain point, I think the Bolts, they just wanted to see any sort of kill happen. We saw so much getting expended time and time again onto Rongi on that Fenrir, and it just never really boded well for the Olympus Bolts. We saw, handful of pickings across this set, but for the most part, it just felt like the Leviathans were largely in control of the entire map pacing and pressure.
And Hazer, I know how much you were watching. There was at one point I walked by while you were doing your stream, and I saw your foot up in the air. I have no idea what was going on, but that's kind of how that game was going.
Is that against TOS?
I was just showing my
soft
toes.
He had his shoes on. It was safe.
Never know what people are into, man.
We were showing off the socks, and that was kind of like where this game was, right? Like mentally, it was kind of like, okay, cool. I guess the Leviathans are going to win this next fight again. It felt like so much of a heavy investment early on for the Bolts that just never had any returns.
Yeah, it just felt like it didn't feel like they had any advantage on the map anywhere. Even when they made the effort to rotate Barracuda over from the duo lane to the solo side of the map to go for objectives, even then, in 5v4s, they didn't look like they were in control of the game. They just never looked in control. They never looked confident. And I think, honestly, they almost lost this game after game one rather. It felt like after that long back and forth of fire, they finally win it. They lose out the game, getting wiped. We never saw the Bolts again in this set.
Mentally, I'd be out of it too if I lost to a Nox, just in general. So that is something, and that bears repeating. We'll talk about that more in the post-game show. But there was a Nox this set, and that is always worth remembering. But this game, again, Taco, it just felt pretty clean, and a lot of it, like, there's not necessarily one individual player, although I will say that triple kill at the very end from Shinto, where he stood up, he stopped playing the game while they were winning. It just felt like everybody kind of had their moment.
That was almost a perfect fight even for the Olympus Bolts, and then the Zapman effect kind of took over. I think that Zap's positioning around that final Phoenix siege that led into the Game 3 win, that was a huge setup play there from Zapman, really taking full advantage of that Death's Embrace, plus the Aussie passive, proccing it just the right time for him, able to position, and he just went in. That's the difference, I think, is just there was just so much confidence in everything that the Leviathans did throughout this set, and I think it definitely just took a massive hit there to the Bolts, because that is a tough one to lose when you have the Enhanced Fire Giant, and then you siege the Phoenix and everything just goes wrong.
And his positioning has to be going really well, and the fights have to be going really well for him, because I distinctly remember thinking about Medusa's passive some of the time, and I'm like, that is like the last thing in the list of everything in this game. The last thing that should be on my mind is the fact that Medusa has that like half strafe penalty when you're moving, side to side and backwards, and yet at the same time, that's exactly what Zapman was making me think of in a lot of those movements and the way he was moving around in those fights. Either way, it's a well-deserved win here for the Leviathans, and they move forward now to face off against the Camelot Kings. So there are your matchups for tomorrow that you can tune in. The Titans and the Scarabs will be the first one. Of course, now the Leviathans and the Kings. Something that, Hazer, if I'm the Kings, I'll admit I'm a little worried. That was a very good set for the Leviathans.
Yeah, definitely strong. This didn't look like the same Leviathans that the Kings managed to dispatch at the Phase 3 playoffs. Yeah. They looked very, very strong. They should take a lot of confidence from this win as well, I think, which is something that I believe the Leviathans need. They need confidence. They need to know that they can do it on the big stage and they can get through these big matches and maybe go all the way.
And it's one of the things, I know we had joked about it at the end of the Phase 3 playoffs, but the Kings had played 15 games that weekend. They played against the Scarabs, the Leviathans, and the Titans, and they had played so much Smite. But you also have to think about the fact that now the Leviathans have that 3 under their belt. Same thing for the Scarabs. They've got their 4 under their belt, and they're going into what is a Titans and a Kings that are a little bit, well, cooled off in comparison. So we'll see how they'll handle that one. Of course, all of that stuff tomorrow. We're going to be breaking down the entirety of the set, getting the post-game interview, and of course, looking forward to tomorrow in the post-game of the day, at the end of the day. That's actually how it turns out. Either way, we'll be right back, and we'll break all that stuff down.
running to. What you want really, I don't know, but you're always telling me what I should do. Get off my back, I don't like it like that. I've had enough fire, I'm about to snap. I'm fed up with this, I'm getting sick of it. I'm fed up with it. I'm fed up with this, I'm getting out of it. I'm fed up with it. I don't care about your stories, I don't care about your glory days. You're just really boring, I don't wanna hear it, so just go away. What you got, well, I don't know, but don't try to pull me down your rabbit hole. I never asked for your point of view. Don't keep telling me what I should do. I'm fed up with this, I'm getting sick of it. I'm fed up with it. I'm fed up with this, I'm getting out of it. I'm fed up with it. I don't care about your stories, I don't care about your glory days. You're just really boring, I don't wanna hear it, so just go away. I don't care about your stories, I don't care about your glory days. You're just really boring, I don't wanna hear it, so just go away. I don't care about your stories, I don't care about your glory days. You're just really boring, I don't wanna hear it, so just go away. I don't care about your stories, I don't care about your glory days. You're just really boring, I don't wanna hear it, so just go away.
Well, the first day of the SWC is in the books. We only had 7 games today. Very, very, well, I want to say shorter than the 9 Hindu predicted, but it's only shy by 2, so that's not really that much
Still
shorter.
after 8 o'clock.
Yeah, it's still after 8 o'clock. We've still been here a while, and it's still been a fun, action-packed day of Smite. Of course, if you want to join in on the conversation, not only can you find us on Twitter and get featured on the broadcast, but you can go to discord.gg/SmiteGame and, of course, join a bunch of, I'm going to say like-minded peers. I realize that makes me sound real boomer. Like, that's a 40-year-old phrase. I promise I'm not that old, but that's the only thing I could think of when I was trying to describe it. That is exactly who you can join. All your friends talking about Smite in Discord and, of course, hanging out watching SWC together and having the conversations there. So make sure you go to discord.gg/SmiteGame and join in on the fun. But this was an incredibly fun day if you're looking at it. And Agro, I've got you and Mifflin alongside me here for the post-game show. And this time I actually remembered the name of it properly. 7 games total. We broke down the Dragon Scarabs earlier. Now looking at Leviathan's Bolts, Agro, this one was a lot more convincing for the Leviathans of a win.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. The Leviathans came in, they clearly had their game plan, and they executed on it perfectly. I mean, going from Nox support up against the E-set, where they seemed awfully prepared there, to then going with different compositions the next 2 games and still being able to dominate each and every time. I mean, a few times, the Bolts, it looked like they were going to win game 1 on that Phoenix Siege, and then the Leviathans really turned that around, and that was that Phoenix going down in game 1 was the last time I felt like the Bolts had an ounce of momentum in this set.
Yeah, it just really felt like the Bolts lost all the wind in their sails. They had the wind knocked out of them after game 1. I mean, we didn't get to see much from them. It felt like they were really starting to lean into that reactive style of play that we've seen from them in the past when the Bolts do start to fall behind. They kind of fail to go for these proactive plays on the map. They fail to try and set the pace despite picking some compositions that would have really benefited from early aggression. It was a lot of wait and see from the Olympus Bolts, and if you're going to wait and see, all you're going to see is, well, the Leviathan's hitting you in the face. Maybe you catch a glimpse of a fist flying at you.
Now, there were 15 minutes separating the last 2 highlights in game 1 there, which is funny just because to me it was, there were a lot of fights that happened in that 15 minutes. Not a lot of kills, though. Everybody would get low, they'd back off, they'd reset, they'd come back, they'd fight, they'd get low, they'd back off, they'd reset, rinse and repeat, ad nauseum, until the Bolts finally were able to get themselves the Fire Giant. And then a brilliant push from the Leviathans, not only get a bunch of kills, wins them the game for the first one. Game 2, Mifflin, it was a lot more convincing. It was not just, okay, yeah, you guys won, but you were able to repel a base defense. This one was in control for the Leviathans every step of the way.
Yeah, just Panatom setting the pace early on this Gilgamesh, creating so much space for both Zapman and Shinto. If you remember back, I think that was the game where he essentially just went a full defense build, early Witchblade, into the Shoguns as well. And it was so hard for the Olympus Bolts to get the ball rolling anywhere on the map. This is the second time that Lazar decided to go back towards the Bastet as well, and I don't know, man. I don't think that's in his god pool. No. I'm going to be completely honest.
Yeah, it wasn't Lazarus' best look for sure. I mean, you're watching Shinto put on like a legitimate clinic with AMC. I mean, how many times, like, every auto is him leaning over the wall with his left shoulder and just connecting with the stinger or the auto attack or whatever it is. And look at how much space is being created by the front line right there. Panatom, Yarkor, and Rongyu, that front line for the Leviathans that's been so good all year that it felt like that front line was so dominant for them. I think that they really showcased how good they can be in this set.
And we got to see, a very, very, again, controlling game number 2. Game 3 had a little more back and forth from the Bolts aggro. But, and I will admit, my favorite part of this game, despite how fun it was from top to bottom, actually had to be at the very end. Shinto gets the triple kill on the Tiamat, and then stood up, like Zap in the rest of they're still trying to kill the Titan, and Shinto's like standing, yelling at the monitor at the time. Like, he was just in the moment. And it just felt like that's the kind of energy these guys exude, right? It's just the happiness. You could feel the elation from them, and now getting to move forward. This was a huge win for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, all the talk about this team has been, well, yeah, obviously they're great, but can they win in these pressure situations? Are they going to be able to perform their best? And today the answer was yes. And, the problem is that they've got even more high-pressure games coming up, but, I was talking about it a lot before this LAN and that kind of stuff. I don't think that it's just going to be...
He just stopped.
Well, he's standing, you see.
My man's done.
Watch him now.
Yeah, he's been done. I think if the Leviathans play like this, they've got a really good chance to be lifting this hammer right in front of me when it comes to Sunday. They played really, really well. They've got the opportunity to do it easily.
It's going to be fun to watch, Mifflin. I mean, you got to cast that one. You got to ride along with it the entire time.
I did.
It felt like we were just bringing a different energy in, right? We were talking regular season Leviathans is a different beast to tackle. That's what we got to see today. Maybe and then some on top of it.
Yeah, there's just a little bit of a little mustard on that game, wasn't there? I mean, these guys were going insane on the battleground. I will say, I may have a little bit of PTSD. If I see Rongyu get Quadra ultimated ever again, I'm just going to, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the headset off, I guess.
You're done. You've done all the analysis you need to at that point. Hey, stop ulting Rongyu, especially when he's on Fenrir, right? I think that was the true
With
key.
Lonos and Ragnarok? Whatever, dude.
He kept getting away with it. Either way, we've got some Leviathans members standing by for an interview. We got Zap and Hardcore hanging out over here. And Zap, I'm actually going to go to you for this first question because all I have written down is Nox. So what was like? It was your lane. What brought the Nox out?
Just something we've been practicing. We've seen the ESET a lot. They're not the only team that plays ESET. We've been practicing against it, and just Nox is a traditional counter from way back in the day.
Yeah.
And we were like, if they pick it, we'll bring it out, and it worked.
Did it feel weird having 4 mages in the duo lane, like the 2-on-2?
Yeah, I'd say a lot of things are a little weird right now in the meta. There was a lot of changes in the patches right before Worlds, and there were some big changes that were meta affecting. So I think not a lot of things are solidified just yet, and you're going to see a lot of different picks and bans as the tournament goes on.
Has me more excited for tomorrow than I thought I could be. Hardcore, I mean, we expected a lot out of the Bolts. I had mentioned coming into this, but like you guys have had a very interesting history up against this team over the last couple of years. But was this what you expected out of them today?
I don't know. I think we're really confident on what we have been playing. We have been just practicing a lot. We are just playing the get all out like we used to do like all the time. Every time someone asks me, we're just saying that we're just playing a lot. And I think we just came to the point, and with Zap here, you have been helping us a lot and being serious up.
Oh, wow.
So
finally.
Yeah. So, I mean, we just feel great about it. And I don't know, just looking forward for...
I love that we get the compliment, but it did need to be followed with the no, but I actually mean it.
Yeah,
just so you know.
We go at each other, I hate solo laners, he hates carries, so
but
we go at
you've got something to prove, right? Because he was like, well, I was doing your job earlier. So.
Every time he's like, Zab, I never fell behind. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're you played a lot of Chiron. Okay. We go back and forth at it a lot.
Well, it sounds like you guys are in a great mood after that win. Congratulations again on your victory. Tomorrow you're going up against the Kings. It'll be fun to watch. But thanks for your time, and hope you have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's going to be a fun one to watch, especially in that kind of joviality. I mean, their joviality that comes through.
I don't know. Which one of those is right? I don't know.
Let's say both. I said both. We'll say both are right. Either way, it feels like they just have a different air about them right now this weekend. And Aggro, that's like the one thing we've wanted from this team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that having this type of synergy is important for a team that's going to be making a run at the World Championship. But the thing that I noticed, I mean, you heard Yarkor say it, they've been saying it all year, that since Zapman joined, it added that veteran presence.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about him not falling behind when he was...
Well, I mean, that's, I'll leave that for them to decide, I suppose. But I think that if you watch the player cams after Game 1, everyone stands up on the Leviathans and is yelling, they came back, they won Game 1. You know what Zap doing?
That's veteran. He's been there.
2 more. What are we getting excited for? 2 more. and I think that type of presence, that team is so excitable, and that's really played to their advantage. But also having that little bit of, all right, fellas, it's good, but we still got more to do. Is really good for them.
Again, even at the end, Shinto jumps up, is super stoked, not only a triple kill, but they're going to semis. A lot going on in his mind. Zap's just sitting there like, yeah, dude, I got to kill the Titan.
Yeah, somebody has to hit this.
We got to finish the game, actually, as it turns out. And they were low enough health, one misstep there. Maybe changes some things. We can go ahead and take a look at the schedule so far this week. Of course, the things we've seen, the things that remain to be seen, specifically this Saturday and Sunday. I am looking in on Saturday. I'm excited, of course, for all of these semifinals, but the Content Creator Cup has been interesting, being able to see the new Slash map. And Mifflin, I think you're pretty excited there for the Season 9 Conquest map show match, because it's an old guard, and I think you might be an old guard here.
Well, I mean...
a little bit.
I'm not super old, I used to guard. I no
you
longer
are
guard,
23.
all right? That's all that's happened here.
Yeah, here's the thing about Mifflin and being an old guard, okay?
He did play in the SPL.
What are you going to say? What are you going to say? Go ahead.
He's not old enough to wear long sleeve shirts underneath his suit jacket. Okay?
I am. I simply chose not to. I don't have any floral long sleeves.
As he has chosen not to every single time we've worn suits.
That's right.
But he did play long enough ago to qualify for this, I suppose.
At what level? The highest level,
The
right?
SPL level,
Yeah,
that's correct.
right.
Well,
Did
did
you ever get there?
No, but you were at the bottom of the
Oh,
SPL.
yeah. You were playing in the console league. Where were you at on that?
Season 2, I wasn't playing at all.
Oh, that's right. What about Season 3?
Season 3.
Early retirement.
He's casting the finals.
Yeah, early retirement. You're welcome.
He's cast the finals for what, 5 years, and now this could make 6.
Yep.
Going for
It's
you.
his
Either
last
way,
one.
we can look at it. Yeah, Mifflin is gunning for that spot. We'll see. You know what? We'll keep our eyes open. Season 9, maybe it's your year, Mifflin.
That's right. No, you're just right.
That's okay. That's the energy you're coming back at me with. I was hoping it was going to be like, you know what, maybe, but yeah, no, you're.
No, you were correct, and I congratulate you in being so.
Well, here's the bracket for the week, and of course the schedule. What you can expect to see: win to be here tomorrow, 1 p.m. Titans and Scarabs, and then a little bit later, whenever that set finishes, is when the Kings will take on the Leviathans. Again, all best of 5s, all incredibly fun, especially after what we saw the Leviathans and the Scarabs today. The Titans earned their spot, and they chose overall what this team was going to bring and who they were going to end up going up against. It was the Dragon Scarabs that they wanted to be up against. And Aggro, I don't know, it's one of those things, I'm a little shaky on it. Part of me is like, well, the Titans looked absolutely insane.
Yes.
Hey,
That's crazy. I just played more games, man. I was playing against the Lazuses.
You were playing RDO Jungle going 0-14 and getting pentakilled by Vaporish Coast. Thank
you were
very
casting it because I had already retired you.
I wasn't casting that game. I was sitting in the stands going, oh my god, he's
You were
0-14.
sitting in the stands? That's worse.
He's 0-14
That's
on
worse.
RDO Jungle. I'm so glad I'm not casting
Jumpa
this
tricked me, bro.
train wreck.
He was destroying us with it in scrims, bro.
That might be the worst of all, to be fair to all of us.
I'm going to have to check the schedule tomorrow. Like, if I see you two on the desk together, I might have to go talk to Hindu. Be like, hold on, we need to change some things. Either way, it's a fun day. Thanks for joining me on the post-game show. Of
real
course,
hi-rez
thanks for
hours.
watching at home. Yeah, it's 8:30 now. We've been here for quite a while, but we're going to be back and do it all again. Kicking off tomorrow at 11 a.m., but 1 p.m. will be the start of the SWC semifinals. You don't want to miss it. You want to be here with your snacks, with your drinks, with everything in between. But for myself, from these two, from everyone in production, thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Peach it.